All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Board of Supervisors, August 17, 2022, the special session. That's what I was trying to get out. It is 9:36. First up, I have to say that Supervisor Kavanaugh will be attending by telephone. And first up is the discussion, approval, disapproval regarding the 2022 Pinal County primary election handling. Follow up by staff. After they've given their presentation, we'll allow the public to speak. I've got a whole stack of requests here, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of your questions and or comments before you come up. And I would caution everyone, though, that in this, when you do come up to speak, that we'll need to keep it civil and no applauding and cheering, because I'll call you out of order, just as a heads up. So I believe we have Mr. Volkmer. Are you up first, or Ms. Ross, are you up?
Good morning, Chairman McClure, Supervisors, Virginia Ross, Pinal County Elections Director. So I have a presentation that I want to go over first before the county attorney comes up and talks about how he's going to formalize what I'm going to talk about here informally. So my first item of discussion is just my preliminary cursory review of the ballot shortage issue, and I don't have a presentation because I don't want anybody to confuse that that's some comprehensive formal review. But just going and looking at what I found on the ballot order report and the method used to calculate the number of primary ballots for not only the polls, but for our office use for duplications and all of that. So the spreadsheet I found took each precinct, the total number of registered voters, subtracted everyone from the active early voting list, added 1%, and then I still found even at that number, there was a lower number for each of the parties. And that approach, one, is a false assumption that no active early voters or independents would go to the polls and vote, even if they were on the active early voting list. And this is also in the spreadsheet that I had prepared for County Attorney Volkmer's investigator, looking at all the ballot transfer sheets that went out to the polls on election night. There were both party, Democrat and Republican, ran out of ballots. So if you look at that formula I just gave you, depending on the precinct, whatever the preponderance of party registration was, subtracting out those early voters, it would impact both parties just from that formula that was used. So I went through the statutes. Under Arizona Statute 16508, it says you take all registered voters and add at least 1%. So you would be ordering 101% of the ballots, at least, if not, back when I did it before, we ordered 10%. So the statute says you don't subtract anything, you only add. So again, that's just my preliminary finding of why there was such a vast ballot shortage through almost half or more of the precincts on election night. Just flawed logic, flawed assumptions. And I think part of it also is in this job, and in my job as a recorder, you have to be not only politically savvy, you need to be media savvy. Because if you're hearing messaging from one party or the other party directing their members, their voters, to go to the polls or to vote early, those observations need to be taken into account when you're doing this work. And that's just, again, taking cues from that messaging that's out in social media. And I saw that trend in 2020. I heard that messaging. And again, just my cursory review, none of that was taken into account. So also in the ballot order, there's different types of orders, not only for the polls. We have for in-office use, we have sample ballots, so on. The recorder prepares early voting ballots, and so on. So that's just kind of like a high-level review. Any comments or questions before I move on to my poll worker themes?
Any questions from the board? Supervisor Kavanaugh, you there?
Yes, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So the other thing I've done is I received quite a few emails and what I would call after-action reports from all across the county, different precincts, from some from marshals, inspectors, from party district chairs. Thank you, everyone who took the time to send me your report. I read through every single report, and I'm only going to talk about the top-level themes that I saw, and I know there's going to be a more in-depth review on that. So aside from the ballot shortages, there's just an overall lack of hands-on training for the equipment. I think when I looked at the 2022 poll worker training manual, I found some just outdated information, some typos. So clearly it has to be rewritten and developed further. So part of not having hands-on training in the class is setting up a poll and saying, okay, let's open up the equipment, let's practice, let's go through different scenarios. None of that was done. And not a lot of instruction, even to the polls or like a school or whatever the facility is. Hey, we also need tables. Please furnish tables along with using your facilities. The instructions were not simplified. Itemize all the supplies in the cage, and what do you do with them? So on election day, I believe there were some people just sort of drafted into service on that day, and then they would receive, okay, here's your equipment cage with a piece of paper, and there you go, figure it all out. So that's not kind of the approach we want to take going forward. There were some missing items from those. We know we need to replace all the ballot marking pins because they should be fast-drying, non-smear, and non-bleed-through. So the ones we have, even the recommended, those felt tip pins are expired, they're old, they need to be replaced. And as long as we'll look at what is fast-drying, practice, try them out, make sure they don't bleed through. A lot of misinformation on various subjects for how to handle different scenarios for provisional voters and people in the wrong precinct. We need additional staff at the call center. There was so many phone calls that phone calls were not being answered, and just other things such as adequate parking at the polls. So one of our solutions that we're going to start on as soon as you vote today, get somebody appointed, is, yes, we need to revamp the curriculum, redo the poll worker training manual, put together a task force of professional teachers, probably bring in some of our top poll workers who have experience. And again, thank you for all your reports. There's a lot of good ideas there. And also there are election law changes that go into effect September 24th that impact poll worker training. And visual aids are some of the suggestions, even videos showing how to set up something, showing how to use it, having a laminated card as a reference guide or a cheat sheet, if you will, on the table so they can quickly refer to something, additional even patriotic displays, and how about handouts to voters besides just the I voted sticker? How do you check your status of your vote, and so on and so forth. So that's very preliminary of what I was able to cull through all of these reports. And to everyone, again, thank you, and who are telling me they want to come back. You're not discouraged. You want to come back in November. Thank you. We need you, and we will be in touch with you. Does anyone have any questions about what I just said on that?
Supervisor Surtee.
Do you want to do questions now, or you don't want to have all of staff present and then do questions to all of them?
Just if you have a particular question for Ms. Ross.
I was just going to weigh in on, but I think it's going to be a recurring theme of the poll workers, and and how it kind of started the night before when they were there to set up, and they were like shooed away. And these poll workers had more experience than the people that were going to be doing the election, and they wouldn't rely on their experience because they were going to tell them, hey, this is going to be wrong. And so it really started the night before the terrible chain of events that happened the next day. So, but I think we're going to hear that from when the folks get their chance to speak.
Okay. Well, what else can we do? We're already starting working on the general election, and we want to just bring up the Secretary of State calendars. This is just a couple of quick calendars just so people can see kind of the one on the right. That's the official Secretary of State calendar. It's on their website. You can see on the second column. That's for the primary, and you scroll down and you see different BOS. Those are Title 16 laws that fall under the Board of Supervisors authority. You have recorder, you have election, you have clean elections. This is like a 10-page calendar that the Secretary of State publishes. And then the other calendar, quickly, this is our internal calendar. So it's even more in-depth, where we add subtasks and steps that we need to keep ourselves on track, to understand. We look forward, weeks forward, understanding these are the things, what's the timeline to get that done? We need to start now. We can't just wait till the day it's due and get started on it.
Like homework?
Right. So that's just sort of the complexity of elections. And elections is a project. It's a complex logistical project. You have a start date, you have an end date when you canvass, and in between, you're probably even starting on the next election cycle. So it's quite comprehensive, and there's even more steps that just how you do all of those things. So.
And I do notice on there that it says that the ballot deadline is the 25th of September,
Right.
for those that may not have seen that. So we've got 5 weeks.
And we're working on it already.
And you're already working. I know. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Surtees.
Sometime this morning, I also want to revisit how what changed in 2017 when you were in charge of everything, and how the board
And I can
restructured.
address that, right, and I can address that after I finish I can
Okay.
tell you real quickly now if you would like to, Vice Chairman.
I just want to get it out there and have the discussion that, because listening to the statewide media, well, the recorder is in charge of all this, and then they hired her as the election. So explain what happened in 2017 when we did change the format of the responsibilities.
So where you see everything that says BOS, it's a similar process to when a school or jurisdiction contracts with the board to do their elections. The board contracted with me in my first term to manage on behalf of the board. So you weren't delegating your authority, you were just contracting with the recorder's office to manage that process, oversee that process on your behalf. And at the end of 2016, the contract expired. I took a look at the growth in the county and my duties, and I just felt it was too, let's say, heavy of a lift, because I was spending 100% of my time at the elections office. We had hired Michelle Forney at that time, and I felt she was capable enough without me overseeing her and working with the board and the county management that I needed to spend my time being the recorder, which is what I ran for office in 2016, and not try to manage both departments at the same time. So the contract expired, and we just did not renew it.
Okay, thank you. And so you think going forward, because it seems like Maricopa County, it's still under the recorder.
It wasn't, and now I'm not sure. I think it might be again. I'm not sure. Only a few counties have the recorder manage both, and a lot of times at the end of their contract, it may or may not continue depending on the workload.
And as a note, though, to say that when she did that we can't pay her more to do that because her salary is statutory just like ours is. Mm-hmm. So you can't say, oh, if you'll do this, hey, we'll give you, throw you an extra bone. It doesn't work like that.
But can you beef up the whole office to possibly do it? So just something to be continued discussions.
Right, and I was going to point that out when I look at the org chart as to why that issue came about.
Okay,
Vice Chairman
thank you.
Sturdy, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what can we do? Well, the county has indicated that we're going to build a brand-new state-of-the-art warehouse to house all of the election functions, and that'll also be on the new proposed org chart, that all of those groups would be under one roof. And that hopefully we'll get that done before the next 2024 election. So I would like to start with the legacy organization chart for the elections department, and that's that one. So this is the legacy elections department. With turnover, some of these positions have gone vacant and unfilled for quite a while, and I think we only had 4 election specialists, but now we're going to have 5. So recorder trying to manage without having its own elections director and a more robust organization. So when I say legacy, this was we didn't even have the elections technology manager until I was about halfway through my first term managing this department when I asked for that position. When I came in, we had 4 people. And that was when the county had 83,000 voters. Now we have 275,000. So this legacy organization chart has prevailed for almost 10 years. And now we see, because even in the best of times during election cycle, one person goes out sick for whatever reason, FMLA for some extended period of time, that's a big hit. To just have 3 people left or to have to bring someone in. So we want to talk about the new organization chart proposed. So here's the new organization chart that we spent all week working on with county management, human resources, and Recorder Lewis. And this is the organization that would be housed in the new county elections warehouse. So we would have everyone under one roof, and I guess it would be here in Florence. So on the left, in the yellow boxes, those are the new positions that we're going to talk about on the second item. And I'll just briefly preview that for you. We're going to have 2 deputy directors, so under the elections director. One is going to be over what we call voter services, and this is the ballot layout design, proofing, the poll worker training. That person will also handle all the IGAs for all the jurisdictions. There will be the ombudsman to the cities, towns, fire departments, all the jurisdictions, and have staff for that, working with county staff that we want to bring up probably as we say more in-depth training, 2 or 3 days of training, and they would also be at the polls to kind of oversee that. They will be the ones probably to have the keys to open the polls because they're county staff, and they'll have multiple keys, make sure you get the polls open on time. And there's a lot of duties that go with that. And then, so the second deputy director is going to be operations and logistics. We have somebody already slotted in that position. I just reassigned someone to the administrative services, and hopefully we'll have the poll worker person as soon as tomorrow, Friday, and rearranging. We're going to hire an elections technology. That's already an existing position in the county. It just has to be created. We have someone slotted in warehouse management, and the operations person is going to be overseeing tabulation, warehouse management, all the election system security, equipment, and all of that. logistics, day of operations. Any questions?
Any questions from the board? I commend all of you on your work. This was great work you guys did this week. Looks like a corporate structure.
Mr. Chairman, just ask if Ms. Ross wanted to explain what we're going to do on the poll workers and the county assignments.
Right, so on the gray box, I think that's why I said staff is going to have the keys to open up the polls. We're going to do a 2 or 3 day training, and we're going to have 2 or 1 county staff to sort of be probably like super inspectors or something like that to make sure that they are watching the activities at the poll. We don't want a voter leaving for whatever reason that they were not given proper information to either, if they're an out-of-precinct voter, get a printed slip, here's where you need to go. No, don't leave, you need to vote a provisional ballot, or whatever the situation is. So they're going to be there doing that extra observation to make sure that the flow is going well and be responsible as county staff for that particular poll, the activities that are going on. And again, we said we're going to develop new curriculum, more in-depth hands-on training, and go through that. We're going to put a task force together right away and put that together. Any questions on any of that?
So all this will be in place for the next election.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So, Recorder, did you want Recorder Lewis to talk about her sort of combined org chart there? I don't think we're going to talk today about the new positions, but that's just sort of her vision going forward.
Ms. Lewis, did you care to speak? I see you shaking your head no, but what the heck, right? You're here.
Chairman of the Board, McClure, Vice Chair Surdy, Dana Lewis, Recorder for Pinal County, Board of Supervisors. What does this look like? It looks almost synonymous to what we see on the Elections Department, but the roles that are in the Recorder's office that work in tandem with the Elections Department. Those are starting with the electorate, which is where elections start, which is the voter registration department. We already have a chief registrar. However, in looking deeper into the department and to ensure efficacy of our roles, we decided that it was best that we had a lead deputy registrar that would be overseeing the daily operations of the staff, and this would allow for the chief registrar to continue to grow our programs, have hands-on in the program management, and a lot of that has to do with our AVID program and voter outreach and coordination. Also, to be mirroring the elections department, it makes sense that if I have a chief deputy recorder who handles the recording side of things, which we record a lot of documents in Pinal County, if you folks don't know that, we need to have that same type of person overseeing the election services of the recorder's position. And what that would be is over the voter registration and early voting department. Questions, gentlemen?
Would you, Supervisor, what's your name? Goodman, that's you. Go ahead.
I appreciate that. Do you have any other, you were going to say?
Okay.
Okay. Hey, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, as you're talking, one of the things, I'm looking on the flow charts here between you and the elections department, and I know one of the biggest things for me, and I think other people, is that cleaning up of the registration rolls. You know, for me, it was, you know, I've had this happen because my in-laws lived next door to us, and they both passed away. And we were getting mail-in ballots even after they'd been gone for 2 or 3 years. And so, you know, I didn't think anything about it, about reporting their death or anything else, and that's probably out there, but we just rip them up. But the point I'm getting at is, what is the process for purging these that have deceased, cleaning up the rolls?
Thank you, sir, for your question. So in Pinal County, we're one of 13 counties across Arizona that utilizes the Arizona Voter Information Database, or AVID, that you're aware of. There's 2 other counties that have interface roles with AVID. The Department of Health Services and court systems are required to report changes in life status, such as felonies, ruling of incapacitation, and death. This data is uploaded into AVID through a dashboard, and our team works daily, not quarterly, not yearly, but our team works daily to update registration records. Name changes oftentimes are reported through MVD, Motor Vehicle Department, using Service Arizona, which also uploads into AVID. However, voters do have the ability to come into a recorder's office or a voter registration office and update with their voter registration form and DPOC proof of citizenship. So marriage licenses, divorce, adoption forms, they're able to update their names as well. The state of Arizona also participates in the Electronic Registration Information Center. This is ERIC. This system allows us to improve the accuracy of our voter rolls by identifying cross-country moves that create duplicate registration of voters that died out of state. Or if you move from Arizona to, say, New Jersey, it says, oh, look, now you're registered in New Jersey. We're going to send a report through ERIC to AVID and say, you can't be voting in 2 places, so we need to give you a notice so that you can take them off your rolls and they're updated to vote in that new state. We are members of the Voter Registration Advisory Committee that stays abreast of ongoing enhancements and changes in legislation to ensure the county's compliance. And we use the best resources available every day to ensure the integrity of Pinal County's voter rolls. Our staff sit on enhancement and strategic steering committees for all of these above programs, and have had recent contact with county offices to seek additional training for our staff. So when we talk about the voter rolls, you need to also understand that elections do start with the electorate. These are people that are registered to vote. Voter education and outreach is a huge piece of this puzzle. I'll be working diligently to educate the registrants of Pinal County of the responsibilities and the trusted resources available to them. So I intend to get them involved in these processes, and so that they feel confident in our roles as registrars in Pinal County, but also that they can own part of the process as well. Does that help answer those questions, sir?
Yeah, it does. That's pretty extensive. I know I talked to Virginia about it, I think, and it was probably within the second year that they were passed on, both of them. And I know Virginia took care of it and got it all straightened out. I just wondered how often do they update that information, is because you can only go off of what the data is, correct, right? And so I'm just curious how long it takes for that information to get transferred over to where all of our election departments are able to clean up their, and it sounds like it could be a pretty lengthy process of, for us, for my mother-in-law, for instance, it was almost, I think, 2 elections.
And statute has changed since then.
Okay.
So, yeah,
okay,
now it's reported on a monthly basis to the Secretary of State, and that's the information that is loaded to our dashboard, and we update daily.
Okay. Hey, thank you. Appreciate
You're welcome,
it.
sir. Other questions?
Supervisor Surtee.
Yeah, I was going to go along the same line. My office got just as many calls about how do we clean up the voter rolls as the election problems. And a few weeks ago, we had someone at this microphone say they moved here 2 years ago and they showed up to vote and they couldn't. I thought that was a good thing. I don't think they should have been allowed to vote unless they re-registered. They then went to their old place. They could easily have voted twice that day. So that's a problem to make sure. And you talk about reach out, maybe get with the real estate agents that whenever a home is sold or someone moves in, let them know they must re-register. And, we all have our own districts with different municipalities. I've been hearing rumors for years that folks outside of the city limits of Apache Junction have been voting in the city elections. The zip codes are the same, 85120, 119. How do we make sure? And then if you ask the person, oh, yeah, I always vote for that, but actually they live 200 yards out of the city, what can we do to look into that and make sure that only people in municipalities are voting correctly?
So the recorder's office is not responsible for addressing. And we do work with the GIS department as far as certain things like, say, redistricting, but we are not in charge of addressing. I think that I could get a better answer to you after I was able to talk with staff about that more and maybe understand on a better complexity of what you're asking. So I could get back to you on that one, sir.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? Comments? Supervisor Kavanaugh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dana, one of the complaints I received is that a lady was out of state 13 years, came back and asked to vote, and the folks at the polling place looked and found that she was still registered here. How do those systems address someone who's moved away for 13 years, and in this case still remained on our voter rolls? She said she had voted in Nevada, now is still on our list.
I wish I could tell you exactly that scenario. To me, it seems odd that she wouldn't have received some type of information, election notice, something from us. However, I can't hypothesize what occurred without a name. So I've already received this email, but I can't get to the root of what could have happened or educate her or inform you until I know whom the person is. So if that person would reach out to me directly, I would be glad to meet with them after today's meeting and walk through the process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other Supervisor Surtee?
Yeah, I have another question I got from one of the poll workers. He was disappointed that there was no signature verification on the ballot you used to, and then you'd go in and you'd have to sign, and that went away. How did that happen, and what is he actually talking about? Because you no longer sign. There was a electronic pen, and my signature with my finger doesn't look like my signature with a pen.
And I can speak from historical experience in regards to that, but that is a Virginia question because that is with the elections department. Virginia, do you want to talk about the poll pad?
Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
So date of voting, when a person signs, that's not to check their signature. They're just signing that they came and voted, and they will get credit for voting that they showed up. They have to show identification, a photo ID. And if they don't have the photo ID, they have other information to prove that they are on the rolls, that that's the voter, and then they're allowed to they're signing the pad to acknowledge that they showed up and voted.
So the photo ID takes the place of the signature verification.
Right, because they swipe their driver's license or scan it, and then that would bring up their name and what ballot they need to get.
And I know in the last legislative session there were lots and lots of bills were going through to try to do things like this to make sure that folks were legal and voting in one place.
Correct.
So
thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman Surtee. I don't have anything else to present unless you have any questions. We're going to have County Attorney Volkmer come up and talk about his steps of who he's hired to do the more formal review.
Before you take off, I believe Supervisor Miller has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't really have a question, but I do want to kind of focus on something you said early in your presentation, and that is potentially doing some video for training for the poll watchers and for all of us, indeed. And I think one of the things that came out as I investigated or discussed with people that worked at the polling center or where you process each of the votes is how intense that labor is to get somebody's mailed-in ballot out of the envelope, check the signature, put it in the machine. If they have any write-ins, they have to set that aside, validate that those write-ins are correct before when it was being explained to me, it was pretty intense. I was like, no wonder it takes us a couple days to get all this done, or a week, or whatever it took, because I think the public doesn't really understand that, and I think we need the education, not just for the people that are going to help us at the polls, but for the public in general, so they can see the process step by step that your ballot goes through from start to finish, particularly the ones that are mailed in. So I just wanted to bring that up. I thought that was something that is lacking, and it's all about education, and we all need to learn something every day. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Hearing none. Thank you, Ms. Ross.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Volkmer.
Chair, Vice Chair, Board, good morning. Kent Volkmer, Pinal County Attorney. With the Chair's indulgence, I'd like to just back up a little bit on a couple things that Virginia and Dana said that I think really need to be reiterated, not only for this board, but for the public at large. Is the board comfortable with that?
Yes.
So, Board, I'm sure you recall last Wednesday we were here. There was an open board meeting, and Community Development brought in an auditor that came in, or a specialist, and he essentially assessed the county. And he said, boy, you guys are as lean as anybody I've ever seen. In fact, your workers are doing a yeoman's work because of how lean you've always been. That's something we as a county have always really prided ourselves in, that we've been lean. However, elections is not the area you can be lean in. Virginia had a lot of information, and I think this bears reporting. When she came in, there were 83,000 registered voters. We now have 275,000 registered voters. That's more than a threefold increase in the number of voters. When that diagram and org chart popped up, there was a collective gasp from some of the members in the audience. This looks as if it is an incredible, rapid increase in government. It's not. The reality is there's only 4 positions. That is not a rapid increase, particularly when you think we haven't changed since that 83. In fact, it's less than proportional. But what those positions are is they're professional positions. Because we were so lean, we had single points of failure. That's one of the things that both county management, this board, Virginia and her team have identified, is there wasn't redundancies, there wasn't the ability to have people double checking. What this gives us is professionals and with knowledge in the position where there is redundancies, where there is somebody that can check. There's not anybody that's on an island that if one person screws up, they fall through. So this isn't the rapid expansion that I think it may look like. It's actually a very common sense, very dedicated, very thorough analysis on what we need and why, and it's not necessarily the end result. And that leads me to sort of the rest of the conversation. The Pinal County Attorney's Office, on behalf of the county, has entered into an agreement with an outside counsel, Coppersmith Brockelman. Coppersmith Brockelman are preeminent elections attorneys. They have an entire department that is their focus. We reached out to them way back when we had the first issue with the ballots that were improperly mailed out on the early ballots, and they've been with us throughout. And then when this latest issue occurred, we were on the phone with them that same day, interacting with them. Our belief was, and after communicating with them, the best thing we could do at this point would actually be to hire an elections expert. And I know that the public, at least to me, has expressed they don't think that elections expert, they don't think that consultant should answer directly to me. While nobody's alleging there's anything untoward, my job is to protect the county. My job is to limit the county's liability. And if we hire this consultant that is just going to answer to me, there's at least potentially the appearance that the person's not going to be really honest, and they're going to try and paint the county in the most favorable light possible. That is why we decided that consultant, that expert, should actually report directly to not me, but the outside consultants. After working with them, explaining our problems, looking at the various people in the community, we have been able to identify an expert consultant. I am prepared to give the board this gentleman's name if the board wishes. I'm guessing.
Yes, please.
The outside our outside counsel has actually entered into a contract with a gentleman by the name of Brad Nelson. Brad Nelson has over 45 years of election experience. He was the elections director in Mojave for 7 years. He was the elections director in Pima County for 20 years. So he's had direct Arizona experience. He actually got his start in elections in '76, working for the Maricopa County Elections Department. He was in Colorado for a period of time. He has a number of qualifications. He has a certification. He actually went to Auburn University, where he actually got a certificate specifically in this. He has his bachelor's degree. I mean, he has an entire bio that we can make available to the public. But one of the things that he doesn't mention in here that sold me on him, why I thought this was an excellent idea, is Pima County had a bit of an election issue 15 years or so regarding their RTA. And they wanted, the board and the public demanded somebody come in. So he actually was on what would be Virginia's side of this, where they come in and say, hey, here are the things that we see from the outside. So he knows what's beneficial. He knows how elections work in Arizona from the ground up. He's been at a heavily Republican community. He's been at a heavily Democrat community. That's a nonpartisan issue where he's coming in and doing an assessment. I've personally had the opportunity to speak with him at length, at least one. I know my civil team spoke with him on a couple different occasions. Very competent, very appropriate. The other thing that was really important for us is this can't be an FBI investigation that takes 2.5 years. This doesn't do us any good if we get the results November of 2024. What we have discussed with him is our ideal timeline is 30 days. We're really hoping we can get this in 45 days. And that is important because, as the chair mentioned earlier, September 25th, we've got new ballots that are coming out. If he comes and finds all these issues after the fact, it doesn't really help us much. Obviously, there's no guarantee that he can get it done because we don't know how much information is actually going to come out. But it is important that today, and all of these emails that have come forward, that this information continues to be brought. You know, Virginia talked about a high level. That's what we're really going to be focusing on, high level issues. There are one-offs. Unfortunately, because of our time frame, we're probably not going to be able to fix every one-off, but we need to fix the big, substantial, fundamental issues that are going on. Now, we believe that Virginia has them taken care of, but Virginia is trying to look backwards, figure out what went wrong, gather information to figure out what's happening now, and then prepare for the future. That's not fair to her. That's not fair to her team. So the idea is this expert's going to come in, this consultant's going to come in, relieve her of, hey, what went wrong, so her focus can be on moving forward to make sure we're there. But he's going to be able to provide some additional insight and information and suggestions. I do actually have a brief summary of what the scope of work is, and I'm just going to read it because it's easiest. The review will focus on 3 primary issues. First, it'll analyze what caused these issues, including why municipal contests were omitted or incorrectly included in some of the ballots, and why an insufficient number of ballots were sent to the polls. Second, it'll analyze election, county, and other officials' responses to and management of these issues, including how their collective response could have been differently managed. That's on us. When we found out these issues, what could we have done different? And then third, it'll recommend how to avoid these issues moving forward, particularly in the upcoming general election, not only here in November, but also, again, coming up in 2024. If the board is so willing, I would like to pivot. I know Vice Chair Surdy had asked a question specifically regarding people voting in and out of city limits. I do have some information. I was fortunate enough to be able to present this information to the city of AJ on Monday. I don't think the electorate at large has heard this, and I don't know that the boards had the opportunity to hear this. If there was a silver lining in the dual ballot snafu, it is that we can unequivocally identify everybody that voted in municipal elections because they had to vote on that separate election that had the bright orange stripe across the top on those 7 municipalities. Because we can identify explicitly and specifically who received a ballot and who cast a ballot. I can't tell you how they cast their ballot. I can't tell you who they voted for, but they did in fact cast a ballot. We know who they are. We know their registered physical address. What we can do is we can then, working with our GIS team, plot every single physical address within city limits. And then we can look and say, did anybody vote in a municipal race whose physical address did not fall within those city limits? We have been able to do that for all 7 of our municipal races. I want to give a quick shout out to obviously Virginia and Scott Johnson and Leo and Holly Robinson from IT and Sarah Hess from IT. They have been absolute lifesavers working together to do this, and we've actually have all of them. I can show you just sort of generically what they look like. This is AJ, for example. You'll see all these tiny little red dots. All these tiny little red dots are actually the physical address where somebody cast their vote. We've got 3 different ones. But what will happen is all these stripes tell you the different precincts and the different precincts parts. But if there's no stripes, it tells you it's a county island or a county precinct where they're not, precinct part where they're not eligible to vote. The question has been posited, well, people have come to us and they've said, well, I voted in the city election and I don't live there. I have two responses to that. One, please give me their name. I want to make this abundantly clear. The administrative review is not a criminal review. But if you knowingly cast a vote in an election that you're not entitled to cast a vote in, that is voter fraud. There is an AG that is already assigned to it. I also have a sheriff, who I believe is here, who sits ready, willing, and able to investigate any of these illegal actions. The only way they could do that was to lie to us. The only way they could cast that vote is if they said, well, this is my address, but actually live somewhere else, and registered with their elections department with a faulty address to give them access, because everybody that cast a vote has their registered address within city limits. We can say that without any question, any concern. And again, I believe it was Dana earlier who indicated that they won't give me a name. When these reports come forward, my neighbor doesn't work. That's not specific enough that we can look into it. If these things exist, we take them seriously. Let me make it clear to this board, to the audience at large, to everybody that's watching this. We take these allegations very, very serious. If there was something going on, we need to know. But telling us generally, well, you know, in AJ it happened a few times, that doesn't help me. I need to know a name. I need to know. You're not narking people out, but what we're doing is we're making sure that our elections are clean, fair, and appropriate. So this is a formal request to the public. If you have specific instances, let us know. And I don't want anybody to be afraid. We're not out trying to hang people by their toes. If people inadvertently did it, there's common sense that's used here. But if they inadvertently did it, we need to find out how it happened and make sure it doesn't happen again. Because if it was able to happen once, chances are it could happen somewhere else, and we need to stem it. I can tell you, I had conversations with our sheriff. We've had conversations within our office. As I said earlier, there's an AG that's literally assigned to investigate these things, specifically for Pinal County. And my office is in direct and regular communication with this person. There are avenues to properly redress this. We're not trying to hammer people, but we need to figure out what's going on. And with that, I have nothing further to present today, but I do stand for any questions that the board may have.
What if some of this is inadvertent? I mean, the address looks like it's in the city. We don't want these people to be terrified that they're going to get in trouble. Oh, my God, I've been voting wrong. They thought they were voting okay, if that happened.
So there is something what's called prosecutorial discretion. And what we're looking at is we're looking at people's minds. If you thought you were voting, you lived within city limits and your house is there, if it's reasonable, again, we're not out trying to drill people. That's not what's trying to happen. But if there is somebody who's intentionally manipulating the system, who is somebody that's providing a false address so they can get in and vote and stuff they're not supposed to, that's not a person I have sympathy for. They are intentionally defrauding the county. They're committing a felony. It's my obligation to hold that person accountable. But we have discretion. We have the ability to say, this isn't an evil intent. This isn't somebody who's trying to manipulate the system. This isn't a bad person. That's where prosecutorial discretion comes in. Obviously, the AG's office will make a lot of these decisions as well, but the AG's office is of the same mindset. We are not trying to make poster children of people that made innocent mistakes, but we do want to hold wrongdoers who intentionally and knowingly committed wrongs. We want to hold them accountable. That's our obligation as prosecutors.
But I would hope that we could compare addresses also and make sure. There's a lot of county islands in the Apache Junction area. And another thing, I don't want to take us too far off track here, but when you get the inquiries and you watch news all over the whole state about outside influences and possibly the election being manipulated by outside money, and I've spoken with Sheriff Lamb, who I believe is here today, how would you look into that? Is there any way this was manipulated by outside forces? And on another vein, somebody once suggested that the Secretary of State may have possibly interfered too. So if you or Sheriff Lamb could address those things, what's being looked into, if anything?
So certainly I welcome the sheriff's office to come up. The conversation I had with the sheriff was very candid. If there's specific things that he can investigate, they stand ready, willing, and able to do it. Just generically, there's not a way to just generically investigate all outside money or any of those type of things. I can tell you our preliminary review is that there was no outside screw-ups. It was wholly within our office. Again, it was lean. There were single points of failure. We relied on a professional, and it was to our detriment. I can tell you that if information comes out that is investigatable, We have multiple avenues to address that. We stand ready, willing, and able to do it, but we need that specificity. We need to know exactly what's going on, and then part of the administrative review, if it identifies that there are potential criminal wrongdoings, if there was things that are inappropriate, that would not be investigated by the administrative review. That would go over either to our sheriff or the AG's office. That would be separated. But again, at this point, we've not seen anything to suggest that's true. The only, quote, fraud that we've seen are people saying, hey, my neighbor voted. He told me he voted. He told me that he voted in the city, and he doesn't live in the city. But we haven't been able to get that person's name, so we haven't been able to look. That's the information we need. That's the only potentially criminal action that has been reported to me. Now, again, I've not seen everything. Much like Virginia, I've gotten a ton of stuff. I do my best to read all of it. We do our best to source it. And then we're going to be providing all of this information ultimately to Brad. So he's going to have that. He's going to have a copy of today's proceedings. So everything that the community brings up, everything this board brings up, all of the emails we receive will be provided to him. So he will be our point of contact. But that's kind of where it's at. And again, if the sheriff has anything to add, I certainly would step aside.
I believe you'll want to step aside.
Before, can I say something?
Sure. Before you speak, Supervisor Goodman.
First of all, to go off of what you said just a little bit ago, that's the biggest problem we have right now, is that there's so much discussion about fraud and everything else when it comes to our elections. And it's really encouraging to me to hear you stand up there and talk about, and being able to, there was people that made mistakes if they got the wrong ballot, right? I mean, let's be assured there. They probably did. They're thinking, especially people in the Queen Creek area that are living in Santan Valley, and they got a ballot that had the Queen Creek on the backside. And they probably did vote thinking, wow, you know what, I'm in Queen Creek now, and I can do that. And there's people that's happened to. But the other part of there are people that literally do this, back to the ballots, people that have deceased. They'll fill those things out and they'll submit them for their deceased family member. And that is, like you said, that is just fraud and intent to manipulate the system. And that's the part, and that's the stuff that has to be stopped. So I'm glad to hear that our elected officials, that our law enforcement, and to help hold the law are standing here telling the public that's what you're going to be doing. And before you got up there, Mark, I wanted to make that clear from what our attorney has told us as a whole. So I'm good. Thank you.
Sheriff Lamb.
Chairman McClure, Supervisor Surdy, Supervisors, thank you. I appreciate the work that these guys have done as well. The Sheriff's Office, we get involved when criminal matters, when there are criminal matters involved. We won't be involved in the processes of how things happen. If it rises that there was evidence of criminal wrongdoing, then we or the Attorney General's office would step in and investigate that. I'm still sifting through emails from concerned citizens, whether it was pens used, whether it was ballots that weren't available, all the different issues, and I'm still sifting through them. It goes back to what the county attorney says. We have to work off of evidence. I had somebody reach out and say, well, we need to get into their bank records. That's just not how it works. We have to have probable cause that a crime has occurred to be able to go and request warrants or subpoenas. So I know it's frustrating for a lot of people out there, but we are standing ready to protect the elections in the way we can, but we're not going to do it to the detriment of the elections either. We don't want the voters to feel like they can't vote. I will tell you, we did have to make one arrest on Election Day for a voter who was upset that his ballot, he wasn't able to vote. It got to where he was being agitating to other people there, and we did have to make one arrest, and we had one other call for disorderly. So that was the extent of it. I can assure you that we will probably have more deputies roaming around, just making sure that they're available if there's somebody being disorderly on our general election day. We want to have a minimal presence so that people don't feel like they can't come and vote. But at the same time, we will have a little stronger presence roaming around so that if there are issues, we can respond to them appropriately in an appropriate amount of time. And we're working daily, the county attorney and I, maybe not daily, but few times a week, we are communicating to make sure that no criminal issues have arisen to either one of our attention. And if it does, we will investigate it in a very timely manner so that we can address these issues. As far as what Supervisor Goodman, you just mentioned, we have a lieutenant in our agency who personally, his grandfather or his grandmother and her husband both voted in the 2020 election, and they were both deceased. So their elections were, their ballots were received per the Secretary of State. These are the issues that we have to try to clean up, and we are standing ready and willing as the Sheriff's Office to do that. And I would recuse myself as an elected official and allow my agency to do what needs to be done if need be. We just want to ensure that the voters, who I think we have a serious job to do to regain their trust, we've got to do a lot of things to make sure that we can regain the trust of the voters here in Pinal County. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions for me.
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you. Supervisor Kavanaugh?
It concerns me, thank you, Mr. Chairman, a little bit that our GIS and our elections department, sent in a ballot out in error that contained a city election, and someone sends it in and could be in legal jeopardy of a criminal case for sending that in. I think we ought to tread very carefully on this. That's my only comment. We don't want to discourage people from even sending in a vote, and how would we know if they either filled that municipal election in or left it blank? I think mentioning, criminal sanctions where we made a mistake that started the whole thing is concerning. So, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Chairman McClure, Supervisor Kavanaugh, I agree 100%. I mean, we're not trying to scare people. We messed it up, and then it put people in a situation where they were potentially voting in an election they shouldn't have been voting in. It really goes back to what the county attorney says. We will weigh any of these complaints. First of all, there has to be evidence of it. We've got to have strong evidence of it. And if there is, then we've got to weigh into the intent. What we're trying to do is stop people who no longer live here who are still voting, or people who live in Tucson voting in Coolidge. These are the type of issues that we're trying to eliminate. So myself and the county attorney, we're very cognizant of this, and we'll make sure that we're looking for malicious intent and obviously errors that really were precipitated by our inefficiencies. Those are things that we're going to be very cognizant of. And I would highly doubt that a case like that would rise to prosecution. We probably would not even submit charges, and I doubt that the county attorney would take charges on something like that. But we are very conscious of the issue that we presented to the residents of this county. But at the same time, we do want people to know what the laws are and how it relates to it, and that there are criminal actions that can be related to inappropriate voting.
Thank you, Sheriff Lamb. Any questions, comments? Supervisor Surdy.
And if there are another thing, word that comes up all the time now is ballot harvesting. And the two ladies in the front row, they're not law enforcement. It's not their obligation to look into that. So we would need law enforcement to continue to monitor, without intruding, however close you need to be, but remove too. I mean, we do want that looked into if we don't want any improprieties at all. So,
Chairman McClure, Supervisor Surdy, I can assure you, I am very confident. I not only commend you on your choices you made, I'm very confident in both Virginia Ross and Dana Lewis. The work that they've done in the past, we've been in communication. I think all of us as a county have the same goal, which is to make sure that we have a good, clean, safe, secure election, that everybody, regardless of your party, can feel comfortable coming in and casting your vote for the candidate that you choose, which is what the American way is. So I have all the confidence in the world that the two people that you put in charge of these positions are capable and going to be able to do it. And we're in communication, and I know that they know that if they need something from the Sheriff's Office, we're standing ready to help.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much. And Mr. Volkmer.
Chair, I apologize. There were two things that I forgot to mention. One, for those votes, if they did live in the county and they submitted a vote inadvertently, it actually would have been kicked out. There is the program that's there. So, in the example where somebody with Queen Creek, if they filled it on the back of the ballot, we weren't counting those because it wasn't the municipal-only ballot. So none of those votes would have counted. That's not something that we're concerned about. If you got a ballot and you filled out everything on your ballot, you're not getting in trouble for that. That's not inappropriate. That's a mistake that we made. That's not criminal intent. To your point, Supervisor Goodman, and it's very easy to be like, oh, gosh, I didn't know Queen Creek even annexed us. I say that somewhat lightly, but they seem to be annexing a lot of our communities. So it is quite possible that is a reasonable position somebody could take. The final thing that I did want to note, and I neglected to say this, and I apologize, Brad's effective date, tomorrow. So he, I believe, is listening to this. He is aware of this, but per contract, he will start effective tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you, Board.
All this is moving very quickly.
The best we can, Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Supervisor Goodman.
is that something we need to vote on, or is that something that, no, I'm getting the wave over there.
No.
You had previously given us the authority under the county manager. We're able to, and the county attorney's office has the ability
Perfect.
to hire outside counsel.
Okay, perfect.
All right. The end. There's no action needed to be taken here. Is there? All discussion. Okay. In that case, we will move on to public comment. And so I will start. I've got quite the deck of cards here. So I will start with Jennifer. I'm going to ruin this. Hills Bose. I'm sorry. You. Please state your name and generally where you live.
Hi, good morning, Chairman McClure, Vice Chairman Surdy, Supervisors Goodman, Miller, and Mr. Supervisor Kavanaugh. My name is Jennifer Hillsbass. It looks like it should be difficult to pronounce, but it's not. I live in Santan Valley. Supervisor Goodman is my supervisor. And yes, Mr. Goodman, I did hear from several constituents in our area how confused they were to have Queen Creek show up on their ballots, and they're like, did we get annexed in the middle of the night? And I'm like, no. So I have a couple of things that I would like to say, and I have brought my phone up here with me so that I can refer to that. Someone told me just last week, someone told me just last week that leadership is a combination of vision, action, and ethics. And what I am concerned about today rests on the action piece of that. One of the things that I've seen here this morning, after hearing County Attorney Volkmer state that they really hadn't found much in the way of intentional wrongdoing, was giving voice to unsubstantiated rumors. While I do feel that everyone should be aware of what these rumors are that are floating around, he had already said that he had not seen any evidence of intentional wrongdoing by voters or other parties. And it's beneath this body to give voice to those in a session that is now visible to anybody in the world who wants to watch it. You are all the supervisors of the county. The title gives you an overview to the responsibilities of the office, and I have seen in the last month failures to be aware of the responsibilities of this office, and I can give examples, but I would prefer not to spend my time that way. I myself have a history of almost 20 years of being a business analyst who was employed to turn businesses around. And being one who has a history of turning businesses around, looking at budgets, because that's always where I would like to start when I'm trying to make a business profitable again. Anyone who is reviewing a budget in an elections department where that budget has been cut by a third from an off-cycle year budget of $1.5 million to an on-cycle budget of just over $1 million, that should have been right there, a huge red flag that there were issues in that department. As soon as that budget was approved, someone should have been going to that department saying, why are we cutting a third of your budget and expecting to run an election on that? So I feel a little justified in questioning that, especially after County Attorney Volkmer said we were running too lean in the elections department. Thank you, Board.
Thank you for your comments. All right. Next would be Belinda Rodriguez.
Good morning. My name is Belinda Rodriguez. I'm from the Gold Canyon area, District 5. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I actually have spoken before, and so I don't have anything additional to reiterate. I want to commend you for your prompt response to what you've done and put things in motion. The only thing I would say, and I'm sure all of the other individuals are going to touch on a lot of the things, at my polling site, it went very well. Our inspector was amazing, qualified. While she did not receive the things that she needed in a timely manner to do her job, she was very good at her leadership skills were excellent and had everyone work together. The biggest thing I noticed was the ballots that were not used were left behind. And I think I mentioned before, that's probably, I think, even a bigger thing than taking the ballots that were voted on and leaving them behind because those are marked. These were unmarked ballots. They were left behind. They were going to pick up the cages the next day. Sure, they're locked in the cages, but between them picking up the ballot boxes and then putting them in the cage, a lot of things could have happened. So that was probably the biggest thing that I wanted to point out. And thank you again for all the things that you're doing.
Thank you. Next, we have Jill Tabor.
Good morning, Chairman and District Supervisors. My name is Jill Tabor. I reside in Gold Canyon and am a PC, relatively new, so I ask for your leniency at what I'm going to propose. I did my report. I was a poll observer, and the only thing that I thought was a little off, and again, this was my first time, was that we all know we never had enough Republican ballots. We had tons of Democratic ballots, none of which were used. I think we used 5 all day. So when we ran out of ballots, it was approximately 15:30 hours. We did not see additional ballots until 16:30 hours, which I thought was an extremely long time when we alerted them at 12:01 that we were running very, very low. One lady did have one question about, at the end of the day, she was probably one of the last voters and said she was given a mail-in ballot, and she didn't know why she had that. Well, we had run out of the Republican ballots again, and she had a very good reason to question that. So we explained what had happened all day, and somebody said, well, why aren't we using the automated machine for the handicapped people? Well, we got one cage, one key, and neither of them matched. We had to literally break the lock on the cage to open it, and nobody put a lock on it when it left. So that was a red flag to me. Other than that, it was a pleasure to serve. I have not been active in the political arena most of my life, but I've taken it upon myself to do it now. And I thank all of you for doing what you do. And it's, again, a pleasure to do this, and I hope to do this for a very long time. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And by the way, I just want to thank everybody for coming down today. We appreciate having so many faces here. Next would be Cynthia Boutrin. Boutrin? Was that close?
That's close. Hi, my name is Cynthia Buttram.
Oh.
My husband will be here, too. I live in Apache Junction, not in the right area to vote for the municipal offices. So we did get the wrong ballots, too, but we checked and we knew that we weren't supposed to vote. So we did not vote for the municipal offices on the back of our forms. But thank you for having us all here. And I'm here to talk about my first experience working in Gold Canyon as a poll observer. I arrived at 2 p.m. My husband did the early shift. He can address when they ran out of ballots at noon, then they got more ballots. So when I got there, they had Republican ballots. Things were going very smoothly. Unfortunately, they were starting to run out again. And I think if a lot of people came in with their mail-in ballots to drop those off, if they hadn't come in, I don't know when we would have run out of ballots even sooner. The most disturbing thing was that we ran out, I want to say around 5:30, 6 o'clock, the second time of ballots that they had gotten. I think I found out later there was only 48 ballots that were brought to them after 2 hours of waiting for them. We were getting low and then finally run out, like I said, somewhere around 6 o'clock. The disturbing thing was to me that a couple came in. She had urged her doctor to release her from the hospital just so she could vote. They came in right after we ran out of ballots. They were told to come back before 7 o'clock. I'm not sure if they did. Somebody pulled in the parking lot, and they went out and told her that they did not get the ballots. We never got any more ballots. So after 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock, there were at least 4 people that came in. One lady came in and waited for a while, but then at 7 o'clock, when no more ballots had arrived, she just left. So there were at least 4 people who were unable to vote, and basically they had to turn them away. And I really came here because I wanted to share that experience, and that really upset me that we had such a problem with our elections. And I was very disappointed to hear Katie Hobbs interviewed saying that they were closely monitoring the issues in Pinal County, but that everyone who came at 7 o'clock, if they got there by 7 o'clock, they were allowed to vote, because they weren't. So thank you for having this opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you for your observations. All right, Mr. George Schroeder.
Morning, George Schroeder, 2444 West Virginia, Apache Junction. I would ask that Mr. Scott Johnson be a liaison and legal guardian of any documents regarding the outside counsel and Mr. Volkmer's office. I mean, we got to have a chain of custody here. This is part of the problem. Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows what happened. Pinal County has a bad history of weird things happening, unexplained things happening. Well, I do know. I've been here 40 years. It's crap. So we need to have more hands on, more eyes on, and quite frankly, our voter turnout is not good. What, 25%, something like that, overall. Maricopa, they're 40, 50%, because of what we had in 2020. So the turnout is either flawed or people just don't give a crap. So why? Why is this? Because they have a bad history of not doing things right, or only to the powers that be that think they own the state. Do you remember me? I helped facilitate the departure of our last county manager and our last supervisor in court at the Attorney General's office. I gave you the packets. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm not going anywhere. You better get right, because I'm more capable than just that one scenario. I'm working on our city right now. We had a chance to change the managers in our city, and now we don't have that because we got completely wiped out of the process, either by voter confidence, whatever. I don't think there's voter fraud per se, but somebody at the beginning, like we just got these. Great, it's good. I'm looking for them. What happened? I need a timeline. This is our timeline now. Of who didn't get hired, why didn't get hired, who we did hire, and absolutely incompetent. And that's being nice, and that's the best of it. So my city is really just disturbed by all of this, as well as the other 6 municipalities that got affected. So what are we going to do? Mr. Folkman was great in his presentation Monday night, but we need more of it. We need custody of evidence here, because nobody knows anything until we get it 2 years later. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, Ms. Nowak, you're up.
Thank you, and welcome to the supervisors. I'm Kathy Nowak. I live in Santad Valley. I'm the district chair for the Supervisor District 2, and I see that I just wanted to give an overview of this election, all the way from the shortage of ballots, the lack of training of the workers, both for the correct procedures as well as on the equipment. I've got probably 15 or 20 of my PCs that I see in the audience who will talk, I'm sure, about the details that they saw as they were working and observing. I just wanted to say, suffice it to say that we had major difficulties in 6 of the 11 polling places in my district. I am very grateful that the BOS, Board of Supervisors, is giving the voters and the workers and the observers the opportunity to voice their frustrations and concerns today. It is especially important, I think, for you all as supervisors to keep your pulse on something this monumental. I encourage you to get an overview of the election process in every way possible. Visit the early voting sites, the polling places on Election Day. Visit Coolidge as they're doing the signature verification and the provisional ballots and the tabulation equipment. Be aware of the entire process. I commend you Pinal County supervisors for your prompt implementation of the solutions to this situation and for your ongoing evaluation of the progress as it goes along. Hiring Virginia Ross as elections director and Dana Lewis as recorder, with their combined project management and leadership skills and knowledge of both the election side and the recorder, is infinitely valuable. It is obvious to all that they have an excellent way of working with each other, which will benefit the county. And we are also fortunate in this county, I think, to be filled with enthusiastic and passionate individuals willing to help ensure that we have an honest election. We only have to ask for their help in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Gail Peters. I feel like I'm calling baseball, like next on deck. You know, we should have some.
Hello. Hello, my name is Gail Peters. I'm one of Kathy Nowak's PCs. I worked at Precinct 26. I was the inspector there. It was my second time being an inspector at the same place, and it was a totally different experience. One of the issues that we found there was the address was printed wrong. It just stated it was Walker Butte School, when indeed, Supervisor Goodman, it was outside where your old offices were. People had a hard time finding it. In fact, mid-morning, we found we were missing lots of pieces. We were waiting for things from the county. I got a call from somebody who said they had an aerial map and they were trying to locate where we were. I mean, if the county can't find where they were, how can we expect voters to? The signs were missing. We recognize that many things were missing the night that we set up. We got together as a team, and we had a great team. Some of us had worked together before, and we tried to put things together, and it was very difficult because some things were missing. In addition, there were elements in there that had nothing to do with the vote. It's like trying to put a puzzle together and then getting a couple pieces from another puzzle and try to figure out how it all worked together. So the signs that this is your polling place were missing. And I did start calling the night when we set up for help. And frankly, that I think is a major thing, that we need to have someone who will answer the phones. You can't wait for 16 people to get through on the helpline to reach a person. I couldn't reach what were supposedly called the emergency people, but thankfully, I reached Dana. I called Dana. It was just a lifesaver to be able to reach a human being who offered help and took steps to make sure that we got the ballots. Throughout the morning, I was going through the number of ballots we were going through and looking how we were going through per hour, and it was becoming evident that we were not going to make it through the day. There were 2 hours where we didn't have ballots. You know what people did in Precinct 26? They grabbed up a chair, they sat in the cafeteria, they started talking to each other. There were kids there. We shared water and food and cookies and some items that we had there. They talked to each other. Nobody yelled. Nobody was upset. Well, I can't say that no one was upset. We got a lot of questions. How could this possibly happen? Well, we were told by Dana that if they were in line at 7 o'clock that they would get to vote, and they waited 2 hours to vote. And when the votes came, there was a great cheer. People celebrated, they voted, and they went home. And I think we have a great number of voters here who are committed and did what they need to do to get their vote cast. Neither of the training for the poll workers nor the inspectors was very complete, particularly on this brand new system that we had called Express Vote. And then they didn't provide us with a single ballot. It won't work without a ballot. Midday, someone brought us 5. And then people were calling, well, what do we do? What do we do? Well, they told us to let them use the express vote. No, they couldn't. We didn't have any ballots.
Ms. Peters, can you wrap up quickly because your time is up?
Okay, the polling pads are somewhat intuitive, but they need some training. You can't just say, oh, you'll figure it out on site. That's not acceptable. We need better training. I don't mean to pile on, and I'm sure other people will address some of the other issues I have on my list. I supplied to Virginia and to Dana, and I understand from hearing them talk here this morning that they are cognizant of what the issues are. And I do thank you for holding this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Grady, please. And again, if you could just please state your name and generally where you live for the record, please.
My name is Kim Grady. I'm in District 5, Apache Junction, unincorporated area. Supervisor Surdy is my guy. Thank you for having me. Supervisor Goodman, McClure, Kavanaugh, and Miller. Thank you very much. I am a precinct committeeman for Ms. McLaughlin, who's going to speak here later. I'm going to try not to be redundant because all of the above happened. I was an observer in precinct 56 at the Santa Fe Park polling place. Like I said, all of the above happened in addition to the polling place just really not being the right place. Not only did they have limited parking, but the signs that they put out, they were tacking up with packing tape. The Arizona Sun eats packing tape. And so, there were a lot of issues there. But not only that, like the previous speaker said, the information about this polling place was incorrect everywhere, on the websites, everywhere. Nobody could find them. And that was very disconcerting. Like I said, the poll pads, the cage was not delivered on time, so that was an issue. Incorrect ballots were provided. The poll workers were not using the Muni ballot. They were using the bad ballot, basically, the one that had the Muni stuff on the back. There was a lot of things going on at 10:50. The city clerk finally arrived. She confiscated the bad ballots, told them to start using the Muni ballots, which they did start doing, and announced to the group, the poll workers there, voters have been disenfranchised. That is not okay. That is not okay in any case. And so I would say to you, in my profession, I'm called into companies to do what's called a needs assessment. I look at why their workers are not performing. I want to just caution you on making this all an education issue. It's not. The system is broken. I look at, when I do my work, I look at policy, procedure, equipment, attitude, and the training. All of the above is broken. And the one thing I want to say to you is please be transparent in what we're doing here. I love what I heard today, everything that we're doing in terms of process and procedure. Do a risk assessment. It is the law. When something like this happens, there is a federal law called the FESMA that you must abide by. I hope you do that. I hope you're very, very transparent about what you're doing with the timeline and everything else. And hopefully voter confidence can be re-established. One other thing I heard a lot about oversight. Have oversight in place, whether it's Virginia, whether it's whoever you have, please have oversight. Have two people, two eyes on things. The other thing is I heard a lot about intimidating the voter. Don't intimidate the observers either. Maricopa County is doing that. They came out with voter intimidation arrest warnings. If you observe polls, if you observe anybody, we're going to look for voter intimidation. I did not go there to intimidate. I went there to make sure that voter rights are respected. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just remind everybody you have like 3 minutes, and we do have a big stack, so I'm trying to keep it pretty close to the vest here. Pete Sabin, please. Please state your name and generally where you live. I know you know the drill, but...
Yes, sir. I do. Good morning, Supervisor McClure, other supervisors. I'm Pete Sabin. I live in unincorporated Marana, and I'm here talking about election integrity again, which I think is the only thing I've spoken about every time I've come up here. I was an observer. I'm also a PC. I was in precinct 16, 104, Red Rock, Marana. Similar information experiences to everybody else, I'm sure, here. We ran out of ballots. We did turn one voter away towards the end of the evening. The inspector tried for an hour and a half to get a real person on the phone, was unable to do so. The ballots, we did get additional ballots. They showed up after the polling station had closed. And so that one person, if she had waited like 10 more minutes, she would have been able to vote, but she wasn't. So that's unacceptable. That's real, in my mind. That's real voter suppression. However it happened, that's voter suppression, not the show me your ID that one particular side of this equation likes to whine about. You know, showing an ID for everything in our society is not a problem. The markers, I'm glad to hear that was mentioned that they're not going to be used anymore because they do bleed through, and a lot of people complained about them and ended up using their own pens. So I'm glad that's going away. And then, yes, the workaround, the express voting machine, that was unable to be used in my location as well because there were no ballots for it. So I guess my big question is, having been involved in this process now, it's weird. I actually trust the system a little more, but also a little less at the same time because I think it's vulnerable to certain things. And like, for example, the ballot shortage thing. The people at my station, their precinct, they'd been doing this for 20 years, and they said this is the highest turnout that they've ever seen. There has to be some kind of allowance for that. People are unhappy with the way things are going in this country. Something like 70 to 80% of us think we're going in the wrong direction. There had to be some expectation of a record turnout. And I wonder how much Katie Hobbs was involved in this. She's running the election as Secretary of State, and she's also running for governor. And I think that right there is a huge problem. She needs to recuse herself from an election that she's a candidate in as far as her responsibilities go. She can't even run an election, and now she wants to run our state. And
please keep your comments to this situation.
Sure. Okay. And basically, the Founding Fathers left two remedies: to alter or abolish a government that's become unfriendly to freedom, destructive of liberty. And if we can't alter it at the ballot box, then abolishing is, that's not the option that anybody wants. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Tammy Wenta, I believe. Did I get that right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow supervisors. My name's Tammy Wenta, and I'm precinct captain of Precinct 97. I've worked several elections in the past years, and I'm just here to let you know what I've experienced this year. So I was an observer prior to the elections for the pre-voting out at the Santan Valley location. It was pretty dead, but I was there when the messed up ballots information came over, and I just want to say not everything's negative. Tracy is amazing. But the only problems they had out there for like the pre-voting, the directions to that new location are not correct on Google, and so a lot of people cannot find that location as well. As far as training goes, the training dates, there was one training date for the return workers. I just happened to hear from somebody else about other training dates, and there was no communication on the added dates for that. The computers were not up and ready for our training, so nobody was trained on the computers. Luckily, I had experience on computers prior because nobody knew the day of the polls how to even set up the computers, much less run them. The trainers didn't know anything. He read verbatim off of the PowerPoint, and then there were several questions that he couldn't answer that those of us who had worked the elections prior to had to answer. The early ballots, my husband's parents in Casa Grande got Democratic ballots sent to them, and they are Republican. They had no idea what to do, so I had to let them know to contact the voting places or the elections office. I was checking my parents' mail because they were out of town, and they both get pre-voting ballots as well, and my stepdad got one, but my mother did not. Voting day, we had our workers were set up, and I know that this has happened in the past, but we've had 9 people on the list. 2 were Dems, 1 Libertarian, and 6 Republicans. 1 Dem didn't show up. It was very lopsided. We had 1 married couple that ran the show, and they were registered as the same. They were the same people that stayed with the ballots at night by themselves. Previously, we had a couple working, 1 registered purposely as an opposite of his wife so that they could both function as opposite sides. These people were the same as me, so I'm not complaining about that part, but it just looks shady, and I don't want it to mess up our legitimacy. On the day of the voting, we had 5 ballots that were put on top of the Democratic ballots, and they were handed out to Democratic voters, and they were, I believe, Libertarian ballots. There was only 2 candidates on there. This was fixed, and they were able to pull the people and get a hold of them. I'll wrap up. We had a lady do a lot of fuss about the pens as well, and she put it out on social media early in the day, so we had a lot of ruckus about that. But just so that you know, the ballpoint pens were smudging, and I saw it on a lady's hand. So ballpoint pens aren't necessarily the option, and that could have been not a very good thing. I'll wrap up to say voter outreach, as Dana said, is very important. People don't know their precincts. They're changing all the time. Their locations are changing all the time. There was door-to-door registrations the last elections, and then people thought that they were registered, and they weren't. So
thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I am going to cut people off at 3 minutes. I've got about 27 more, so there's an hour and 20-plus minutes here of just people speaking at 3 minutes. So please, please keep it to the 3-minute limit. All right. Cheryl Daniel, please.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Daniel. I live in Oracle. Oracle is a 1-hour drive from here. So the issues that we had took a little while to fix, besides all the other problems. I was a poll worker in Precinct 93. This was my 3rd election that I worked. I'm not an old hand, but I'm not a new one. I repeat, none of the other elections were chaos like this one. this one started the day before, the night before, because we didn't have all of our items delivered to us, including the inventory list. Setup for elections has always worked as follows. The day before the election, the Pinal County workers deliver all the supplies necessary for the election the next day. Such things as voting booths, ballot boxes, poll pads for checking voter eligibility online, express machine.
Everyone else has left the call.
Okay. Express machine, pencils, paper clips, ballots, blank paper for the express machine, which we got 20 blank sheets for the express machine, which wasn't working when we opened at 6 o'clock. Markers, tape, I voted stickers. Along with these comes the inventory sheet, and that's what historically has happened, but it didn't happen this time. So we got voting booths, ballot boxes without locks, poll pads, markers for ballots, some pens, paper clips, 150 Republican ballots, and 50 Democrat ballots. I understand other areas were worse than we were. 20 blank sheets for the express machine. I'm not sure about my numbers, but it seems like in 2020 we had 300 plus voters. And so if that number's correct, we started the day about 100 ballots short to begin with. So we made do with what we had that evening, counting what we had and writing it down on a plain piece of paper. Wherever the pre-election day setup starts, and whomever is responsible, something went awry right then and there because of the mess that we had that night trying to inventory everything that we didn't have. We set up, the next morning we arrived at 5, and there was nobody to answer any phone calls from 5 to 8 in the morning. And then when it did happen, you were number 20 or 14 or 12 or whatever number you were. We set up 2 of the 3 poll pads, which wouldn't connect and or download the software. So at 6 o'clock, we had some people come in, and most everybody left and said they would come back, but one man said, I can't wait. So we took a sheet of paper that we got from an observer and wrote down his driver's license number, and he signed that piece of paper, and we gave him a ballot, and he went on his way. That was how we opened up. One of the poll pads was labeled municipal, which there were 3 of them. We only needed 2, but one was labeled municipal. We didn't know what that meant because Oracle's unincorporated.
Please wrap up your statements, Ms. Daniel.
Okay. Well, anyway, it was a big mess, and I would not want to see that happen again. And I know I've repeated everything that everyone else has said.
Thank you. John Orton, please.
I'm John Orton. I live at 4580.
Speak to the microphone. Thank you.
4587 East Pinto Drive, Eloy, but I'm not in the city of Eloy. I'm in the county. I'd like to thank you for the appointment of Dana. I think she will do a wonderful job. Dana also asked me to come before the board because we were poll watchers in Coolidge, and there was not enough bandwidth. In fact, when she was running reports, it shut down everybody. So apparently the IT department told her that it was $100,000 to get fiber optic brought in. I did check with Cox Communication and put in the address for the office there in Coolidge, and they have 1 gigabyte for $99 a month, fiber. And you can get, for a business account, you can get 2 gigabytes. So it's relatively cheap and quick to install. It'd be nice if we had that ability. The other thing I'd like to mention, I have a whole list of things from the PCs that they noticed were they didn't like, but it's important, the cameras on the drop boxes, they need to be installed by FBI standards so that if there is somebody that comes in with a backpack full of ballots and tries the stuff, you know, the sheriff and the county attorney, if they don't have good images, they can't prosecute these people. So these FBI standards go over the resolution, they go over the frames per second, they go over the placement of the camera. If it's going to be monitored 24 hours a day, you have to have adequate lighting. I mean, all these things need to be met before, our November election. So, and it can easily be done before that. But I'll leave these standards with the clerk here. The other thing that it would be great, PCs, or not just PCs, people that are poll watchers, we're keeping track, we're counting, because they shuck them and they ping them and they put them in batches of 50. All the satellite offices know how many ballots. If they could post that every night, how many ballots to the elections website, then it'd give some transparency to people. The reason this came up is because my wife was working in the elections office the day after elections, of watching, not working. She was an observer, excuse me. And she talked to David, and David said, this is it. We're done with all the ballots that we've received so far. The next day, Mary Rodriguez went into the office, and she was told that they had 50,000 ballots left to count. We only had 70-some thousand ballots cast. How is that possible that there's 50,000 left to count 2 days after elections? So
please
by
wrap up your comment.
posting every day, if all the satellite offices would post how many to a website, then the people can go on and see. The poll watchers can go on and say, yep, that's how many I counted. And it'd just give another layer of transparency.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Your time is up.
Okay.
All right. Brenda Campbell, please.
Supervisor McClure, Chairman McClure and County Supervisors. My name is Brenda Campbell. I have been a Pinal County resident since 2006, and since the general election in 2008, I have been a poll worker working the elections. For the last 5 years, I have been the inspector at Precinct 74 in the city of Maricopa. Our problems for our precinct started on July 16th. I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but there was a training that was held in the city of Maricopa at the Maricopa Community Library. And when the trainer did not arrive, I placed a phone call, obviously to the county office or the election office, just had to leave a message. I also sent an email. And we later found out, thanks to one of our PCs that was in during the training, and reaching out to Dana Lewis, who made some connections. We did find out that the trainer went to the wrong location. The building was locked. There were no cars in the parking lot, and I guess returned to wherever she was returning, rather than taking the time to figure out why there were 22 people at another location that gave up 3 hours of their time, thanks to another inspector who happened to bring her instruction manual and was able to give the class. So we were very fortunate about that. But my question is, I run events for the city of Maricopa. On event day, I'm checking my email. I may not do the voice messages because it's a little bit more difficult, but there should have been something in place that individual had the, knowledge of finding out where she should have been. Outside of that, I'm hearing a lot of these comments. Like I said, since I have been a poll worker since 2008, there have been many improvements, and I have to commend Pinal County for those improvements. But also, I sit here and I listen, and I know there were problems. We were fortunate, even though it was what we called, our team was the Fabulous Five because we only had 5 poll workers. We didn't run out of ballots. The only thing that was missing the day before, and it really wasn't missing, but there was no communication about receiving a second cage and where the key to that cage was. I was able to make a phone call right before the county offices closed on Monday, and they contacted the warehouse, and we were instructed where that key was. It was in the cage that was locked, that we didn't have a key for, but luckily we kind of maneuvered. I won't say that the cage was taken apart because
Can you
that's a
please
security.
wrap-
I'm sorry. But again, there were problems, not those that were addressed here, and I appreciate the opportunity to bring these to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Brenda Gifford, please. Please state your name and generally where you live, please.
Brenda Gifford. I live in northern Pinal County, out State Route 88, north of AJ. Chairman McClure and supervisors, I want to say that in an era of distrust in the election process, the question that begs a response is why this happened. This was fully foreseeable more than a year in advance for anyone giving it a cursory look. We can listen to all of these reports, and people deserve the catharsis of this meeting that this meeting affords, but it does not address the root cause of failed leadership. One speaker addressed the budget cut at a time of great population growth. That's just illogical. Raising the salary and requiring a master's degree effectively or intentionally eliminated the most qualified and dedicated people already employed and eager to serve in this capacity. The toxic workplace environment in the elections department was well known, and it lies directly at the feet of the county manager. I do not think that this is appropriate or extreme overreach to ask for the immediate termination of the county manager and the resignation of each of you. Your own self-respect should require nothing less. I do not want to say that the collective gasp that Mr. Volkmer referenced was not shock at the new proposal, but it was shock at the skeletal structure that was handed to Mr. Frisk. He should absolutely not be scapegoated for your failure to provide him the necessary resources for someone coming in an election year from out of state. The ballot shortage was known the night before. So why weren't they printing them all night to be prepared for what they knew was inevitable the morning of the election? The additional concern with that is it's my understanding that these ballots are all serial numbered. So if you're printing them on a Xerox machine and dispersing them out, what controls are there to make sure that there is not cheating going on? The inability to secure the ballots, to inventory them properly in my polling place, they were not inventoried properly coming in, nor were they inventoried properly at the end of the day. And I don't have enough time to explain to you the chaos that went on at my polling station because our inspector had never been an inspector before. It was his first time, and he was only asked to do it days before. We had been trying to volunteer to be poll watchers or workers since February, March, and we were rejected continually. And 2 weeks before the election, somebody posted on Facebook, if anybody wants to work in the polling places, to email them or text them. So I did. And we ended up being accepted just days and hours before the election. They told us that they had a database of 4,000 people to draw from, and they didn't need us. And then in the last minute, they contacted different ones, including Vicki McLaughlin, who is our precinct captain, and they were 60 people short in Gold Canyon and Apache Junction alone. I don't know what it was like for the rest of the county, but there's no excuse for this colossal failure of leadership, and it lays directly at your doorstep. There's no one else to blame but you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Nope. No applause, please. Cheryl Hall.
My name is Cheryl Hall, and I live in Gold Canyon. And I was a poll observer twice, once at the Clerk and Recorder's office in Apache Junction on Friday, July 29th. On that day, the staff was diligent in asking every voter for their ID and their registration, and they were very diligent in checking signatures. I was very impressed with that, and followed procedures throughout the day. Towards the end of the day, there seemed to be some confusion as to procedures regarding batching. The batches of 50 ballots were created. However, in actuality, some of the ballots ended up on batches that shouldn't have been. So then ballots were deleted from those batches and added to other batches. The office closed at 4:30, and the supervisor had me fill out a poll observer form and asked me to leave it with her. And I was asked to leave shortly thereafter. I left the office at 4:58 per their request. They were still working on and deleting and adding ballots to the batches. And I just think there needs to be a little bit more training for temporary workers. And then this morning I was talking to one of the workers from that office, and she said that it was a computer glitch that caused the batching problems, and once they refreshed the computers, everything went as it was supposed to. And then on Tuesday, I was a poll observer at Precinct 48 at the Gold Canyon United Methodist Church, and this is going to be kind of a duplicate. I arrived at 2 p.m. and the inspector gave me a rundown of the processes, and he reported that he had requested more ballots at 1:30, and then the precinct ran out of Republican ballots at about 3:55, and voters were given the option of using the machine for disabled voters. I think that's called the express machine, and voters were then given the option of using that. Those 20 ballots were used, and still no ballots from the election office. And I let Vicki know, and also called Supervisor Surtees' office to let the woman who answered the phone know that we were out of ballots. Our inspector was unable to get through to the elections office. We had many angry voters, and so our inspector suggested the voters go to wait at the precinct for the ballots to arrive, or come back at a later time, or go to the Lutheran Church on Kings Ranch Road to request provisional ballots. Ballots for our precinct number 48 arrived at 5:50, polls closed at 7. Paperwork was completed, and ballot boxes were picked up about 7:50 and loaded into a truck that had racks on the back, and it was totally open on the top. And that seemed kind of strange to me, that we had all these ballots in a truck that wasn't secure all the way around. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Steve Poe, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and County Supervisors. This is the second time I've been able to come up here and speak. Last time I became a star on the radio for some reason. But I just want to share with you my observations, because I volunteered my time to be a poll observer. So I worked 4 different assignments at the Santan Valley office that Tracy runs. And she did an unbelievable job. Her and Andrea worked well as a team. I got to see the entire process. It was totally secure. I had 100% confidence in what was going on with our election. Even when the replenishment ballots, whatever you call those other ballots that came out for the municipalities came, they were all over that. So kudos to those people in that office. They did a fantastic job. I had to sign in. I had to place my phone in a plastic case along with anything else that I had electronically. Conversely, when I showed up at precinct number 28 on Election Day, the inspector didn't ask for my ID, didn't ask for my certification, didn't really seem like he was engaged. There was no place for me to put my phone, which enabled me, if I wanted to take pictures, record people, whatever I would want to do, which I think is totally insecure. And then, of course, the one person that did take control of the whole situation and led the team through it was Earl Dorr, sitting back here. And he walked me over to show me what was going on, that they were out of ballots. So this was at 2 o'clock. He also showed me the express ballot machine, had no paper. So there was no options for people that wanted to vote that couldn't get ballots. Then at, I think it was about 4:30 or 2:30, I think, no, 2:45, Supervisor Mike Goodman showed up and explained to us, hey, ballots are coming. They're printing them. We understand the situation. So it helped to calm the situation in the room. These guys, the workers, actually lined up a bunch of chairs for people to sit down at and wait if they wanted to wait for ballots. There was only one person that waited. It took 2 hours before the ballot showed up. We want to believe that most people came back and voted, but I don't know how much apathy there was at that point. My biggest concern going forward is, how do we get those people back that heard about this, that either read about it or saw it on the news? My recommendation would be to, when you're mailing out the voter information, that flow chart up there would work with an explanation of what's been rectified to make sure that our general election is secured moving forward. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Cindy Compton, please.
Thank you, Chairman McClure and Board of Supervisors. I was a poll observer, and I at 5 o'clock on August 2nd, 20 precincts, which is about 18%, were out of ballots, specifically Republican ballots. And that's just not appropriate for the United States of America. That's not appropriate for Pinal County. I also observed the problems with the handicap machines, and I find it curious that it takes 3 days for us to have election results. I know it's a complicated job, but that's a job, and it needs to be done more than within 3 days. I appreciate what I've heard from Virginia Ross and Dana Lewis about what you're doing to resolve the problem. And I appreciate that you are looking for the truth. I appreciate, and I would hope that you'd have the courage to do what needs to be done and the faith to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Ireland, please. And please, again, when you come up, if you would please state your name and generally where you live. Thank you.
No problem. Morning, supervisors, staff. My name is Tony Ireland. I live in Apache Junction. And my concern this morning is not with the elections per se, but with the voter registration. And in February of 2021, I applied for a position as a precinct committeeman, and the paperwork was sent off to the elections department. I got a letter back a couple of weeks later stating that I was not a registered Republican, that I was an independent. Now, there's something wrong there. If I've been a registered Republican my entire life since I was 18, and somehow my registration got mysteriously changed. And I know of several other people that have the same problem. And in fact, one of them got changed from Republican to Democrat. And the problem seems to be Republican specific. But unfortunately, I was hoping to bring a letter from him stating such, but I wasn't able to do that. But if you need any more information, I'd be happy to supply that to you. But apparently there is something of a problem when people's registrations get changed mysteriously, for lack of a better word. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Kirk Filer.
Hello, my name is Kirk Filer. I'm precinct committeeman, chairman of precinct District 8, which is Eagle Crest, Saddlebrook. As chairman, I was responsible for finding and scheduling poll observers. I was also a candidate in this last election, so I'm not sure anybody felt more frustration and angst than I did on Election Day, as Chairman McClure can attest to, on how many times I blew up his phone that day and showed up in his office Tuesday evening. So I'm not going to talk about that. What I'd like to do is I've got 3 points real quick. Unlike how I felt that day and the day after, I'd like to compliment this board for taking this matter to heart, taking swift and decisive action. As a business person, what I saw on that organization chart made a lot of sense, and I think is going to address a lot of what we've heard today. Number two, I would like to compliment the board on appointing Virginia and Dana to their new positions. Excellent choice, and highly recommend that in case this hasn't been discussed already, which I'm sure it has, but highly recommend they are involved in any decisions with the elections department hiring going forward. And then three, I had observations from across the county from poll observers. Most of these have already been discussed, so I'll for the sake of time. One thing I haven't heard discussed, I don't believe, is the 30-day period of early voting. I think that needs to be discussed about shortening that time to maybe 10 days. We had reports of permanent county employees that were overworked, got few breaks, went home late, and weren't happy. So that needs to be considered. Also, a couple points that were mentioned I want to emphasize. Somebody talked about the cameras. The cameras recordings were tried to played the day after and day of. They weren't been able to because of the bandwidth issue that somebody talked about. That needs to be addressed. And then also a serious issue that was already talked about, the cage locks. In multiple cases, they had to use bolt cutters to get those locks off on the cages, and then they went back without a lock. All the rest of these have been talked about. Again, I want to emphasize, Virginia talked about the county poll worker guide. I know she'll take action on that. Thank you all for listening and taking action on this. Greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Filer. Gilbert Cancio.
Mr. Chairman, County Board of Supervisors, my name is Gilbert Cancio. I worked at, I'm from Apache Junction. I worked at Precinct 42 as a poll worker. Just going to make note or mention of what some of the problems were at that polling place. When the staff that was assigned reported, turned out the inspector and the marshal were the only individuals with any experience in working an election. The rest of us, I think there was 5 or 6 of us, this was our first time. Once everything got set up, just a little after 5 o'clock on Election Day morning, it was discovered that the computer that was supposed to be used for the city election was for a different precinct. Where I was at was Precinct 42, which is Superstition Mountain Elementary School, and the computer was programmed to have the voters for Precinct 44, which is down at the church further south. Inspector determined that, upon receiving this information, he said, well, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do provisional ballots for the city election. He immediately tried to contact the elections department 5 or 6 times, and it wasn't until probably at 9 o'clock before he was able finally to get through to a human being. And he was kind of abruptly brushed off with the comment that on the other side of the phone, yeah, I'll get on it. Click. Polling place was visited by the Republican district chairman, the Democratic county chairman, both of them who made note of the city election situation, but they stated they could do nothing. However, they did both state that they would go ahead and contact the county. The city clerk showed up later during the day and was upset about the polling place not having the correct computer for the city elections. However, she was of a positive note that we were using provisional ballot, and that considering the situation, that was the best solution that we could have had at the time. 2 county workers stopped by later on during the day to check on the computer situation, and it must have been about 9 o'clock in the morning. They were never able to find out where our particular assigned computer was. Determined that the computer number that was assigned and the case number were off by 1 or 2 digits. They didn't match.
Mr. Cancio, can you please?
And I'm on my last point here. Our polling place received about 5 to 6 calls during the day to see if we had extra Republican ballots, and the calls were coming from other precincts. Bottom line, better quality control measures need to be put in place to prevent this in November. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chris Buttram. I got it right this time, right?
Good morning. My name's Chris Buttram. I'm a resident of Apache Junction. My wife and I served as poll observers on Election Day at Mountain Brook Village, Gold Canyon. This was the first time my wife and I have served in this. I served from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. So how did it go? What went wrong? Everything ran smoothly until we ran out of ballots. Our precinct was giving 100 ballots for all days voting. We ran out of ballots at 9:30 in the morning. Our inspector called for 2.5 hours to get more ballots. None came until 12 noon. Many people were turned away. They weren't happy. I think it's an embarrassment that we are an embarrassment to our state because of the shortage of ballots and the fiasco of 65,000 ballots mailed to the wrong addresses. All this when people are really concerned about elections and election integrity, especially coming up in the very important general elections. But I do say that I am glad that Virginia Ross has taken up this difficult task to correct and fix our election processes, that we get them under control. And I do wish her very best, and I was impressed with her presentation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buttram. Sandra Gross, please.
Good morning. My name is Sandra Gross, and I live off of McCartney. I'm in the county, not in the city. I was a poll observer. I was at Precinct 34. My husband, Steve, was at 37. Just some of the things that I observed. We're both first-timers. Ballast harvesting. I don't know what
everyone else has left the call.
I'm not sure exactly what you consider ballast harvesting, but there was one gal that actually came in with a handful of ballots to drop off in the mail-in ballot box, stated that she was from a 55 or older, 55-plus community and was bringing in ballots for the people that could not physically or were unable to come in. And there was no one even questioned it. No one raised an eyebrow or anything else. Some of the things like the provisional ballots, there was a couple of people that came into and filled them out. There was absolutely no privacy whatsoever. They sat literally across from the inspector and the clerk filling out their ballots, and anything could be observed by anybody that was in that vicinity. There was no one, as I've heard in a lot of people's information, when I came in, the inspector asked me who I was, and I explained that I was an observer. He said, "Oh, you're like a piece of furniture. You can sit here or here," and went on to explain his bad experience previous to that. And I just told him, I said, "You won't get any of that from me." And I literally never spoke another word to him the whole time. I just observed and took notes. He also expressed, even when there wasn't voters in there, but all of us are voters, expressed his personal opinion when it came to voter fraud. To the other poll workers, there was a gal that came in, wanted to change her party. He told her, well, you'll have to go and re-register and you can vote the next election. There was, as far as phone uses are concerned, when it was a very slow kind of precinct, we didn't have a whole, at least during the time I was there from 5:30 till 2, all of the poll workers were on their phones, including the inspector. And then the gal that was, I guess she's the marshal, was also putting the ballots in the ballot box. When we went to vote, the inspector said, we are not allowed to touch these. And where I was sitting, and I'll try to be short, where I was sitting, I could not see the whole ballot box, but I could see the municipal, and people were standing upright, and I can see the arm underneath putting ballots in there, which would have been the marshal doing the assistance. So these are just some of the observations that I had that I thought should be brought to everybody's attention. And like I said, it's the first time, but I will be asking to do it again. Thank you for your time and your help.
Thank you, Ms. Grosser. Appreciate your comments. Oh, now you've done it. Arlene Stasinos? Oh.
Good morning, and thank you to permit me to speak out. My name is Arlene Stasinos, and I live in the North Pinal County in the Incanterra community. And anyways, I am a novice poll observer. However, I worked as an election worker in Northern California. Anyways, instead of beating a dead horse here, I'd like to focus on two areas that I'd like to bring to your attention. I worked at the Precinct 86, and we had a number of issues regarding ballot shortage and so forth. Anyways, the one area that I wanted to share with you, or two areas, I would like to compliment Kathy Nowak and Belinda Rodriguez for their time, and they actually trained us competently, and I felt that was important, and they even gave us write-up and whatever. I just wanted to kind of highlight the areas that they emphasized. Please show up on time for all shifts with your observer credentials and identification. Dress professionally and be courteous to county staff and other observers. Bring a notepad, red pen, no blue or black pens allowed, and water. Understand the process and be alert and take notes. Most importantly, bring a great attitude. And last, use your cell phone or other electronic device inside the polling place. Anyways, it was already brought up about the use of the cell phone, but I particularly was concerned because mine was on silence, and I tried to be a fly in the wall, taking notes. And as my prior retired career as a teacher, 35 years, I was used to taking notes and whatever when I observe and train teachers. Anyways, one of them was apparently I represented the Republican Party, and the observer was representing the other party, the Democrat Party. And the whole time I was taking notes, this other person was on her cell phone, and she said that there was an app that they could use to observe and notate things. And anyways, halfway in the morning, we had a visit by the chairperson of the Democrat Party, and she wanted to address an issue, I guess introduced herself to both of us. And so she's aware of the fact that there was an app. So my concern is if we're going to treat this equally and as a nonpartisan issue here as observers, we need to be able to do that. And that was a concern. So I just wanted to let you know that I don't know what was her notes. My notes were all kind of annotated, and I stated the time, what happened, and so forth. And I tried to, and I was in the corner doing my thing of taking notes, although I was not welcomed very graciously. Yes. So anyways, so those are the two areas that I wanted to kind of just emphasize. The other one was the the ballot machine. And somehow it was not available at that time, and then it was. So anyways, just Precinct 86. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Chip Wilson.
Hello, I'm Chip Wilson, live in Apache Junction, of course the mayor of the city of Apache Junction as well. One of the things that wanted to discuss, I'm here with the city clerk. She wanted to emphasize the fact that, number one, when she went to our polling places, she did not confiscate any ballots. They were set aside that she found that were wrong for the district, or the precinct that was there for. So she wanted to emphasize that. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, I, of course, was running for office, and I went around to all the polls, and I was at, the Moose Lodge, and one of the individuals that came out of there was talking about problems that they were having, and she came out and says that, I'm a city resident, and I didn't get to vote for you. And I said, excuse me? And she says, yeah, your name wasn't on the ballot. Well, one of the poll workers came out at the time and said, well, yeah, you have to ask for it. That's not what you expect when you're going to vote. And I do know that there was training problems, and I definitely think that that's something that we want to emphasize, that we want to see, is the training of the poll workers so that we avoid these problems. Now, we convinced her to go walk back in and to request a city ballot, which she did, and they gave it to her after verifying, and she did vote on it. But when she went to turn it in, nobody knew who had to handle it. You didn't turn it in with the other ballots where she'd done before. She had to go give it to someone else, and that person didn't know what to do with it. So therefore, it was a confusing aspect. So one of the things I think the outcome on this is definitely training, more consistent training, and I appreciate your receiving all these inputs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. At this point, we're going to take about a 5-minute recess. I've still got about 40 minutes worth of comments here. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute recess. Have a seat. Thank you. Just, Okay, first up is David Coward, please.
Good morning. My name is Dave Coward, live in Gold Canyon, Precinct 48, and District 5. And I want to thank the board for this opportunity that you're getting feedback from poll workers and observers. A little bit of background, I served as a poll worker at my precinct since 2008, which is 14 years and approximately 19 election cycles. And I'm probably a newbie considered to some of the people in the room. I've got like 14 points, and you probably heard most of them already, so I'm just going to briefly go through. We had problems with the inventory. The critical thing, we didn't have any provisional ballot envelopes, not until about 9 o'clock. So that's an issue. And the poll books we had 2 assigned to us. One never worked. We could never get it to work, so we had 1 poll book during the whole day. And we were promised some IT help, but unfortunately it never came. We ran out of ballots, just like everybody else. And the strange thing is, in the training and in prior elections, we always had phone numbers for people to call for specific items that we needed during the election. And those numbers would take us right to the elections person that was responsible for that question. Somehow this time, everything went to the county 311 number. So therefore, you had long waiting times, and if you ever got through, you had this poor person that's on the other line could not answer the question, and all she could do was forward our request to the person we were trying to call in the first place. I don't know who came up with that, but that was ludicrous. And there was another issue, too. In prior elections, each inspector was given a copy of the poll observers that were going to be assigned to that precinct. And when they came into the precinct, we were supposed to match their authorization paperwork with that. We never got that. So I had observers coming in. I don't know if they were official or not. So that's a problem. I want to say I ended up with a very good staff. We were fully staffed, but it took some effort. It took some effort on my part because I was sent list of people that were allotted to me to work, but I was instructed to contact those people and verify that they're committed to come. I'm sorry, but I don't think that's in my job description as the inspector. I think that's a part of the elections department, but I went ahead and did it anyways. And I ended up with a full staff, and I can understand where some new inspectors that weren't allowed, familiar with the system, with their staff at the elections department, where they could show up and they wouldn't know who's there. So there was real problems there. And one other point. I did want to end on a positive note, though, that the troubleshooters, that every poll is assigned a troubleshooter to deal with getting materials during the course of the day. And I have to say that those people actually answered their phone. and they were very responsive and very helpful. So I wanted to say that that's one positive that came from the day. So I used up my time, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Coward. Nancy Smith.
Chairman McClure, Board of Supervisors, Nancy Smith, the new mayor of the city of Maricopa.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And what I wanted to do is I want to make a promise to the voters in the city of Maricopa that I will do anything and everything to ensure that election integrity is taken seriously at the county. I believe with all that you've done, you're taking it seriously. But in any way, shape, or form that I can help, I want to do that. So one of the things that I wanted to start off with is talk to our city clerk and find out what she saw during the primary election and provide proposal to you. I've provided copies of my comments to all of you so that they're documented. The first is communication, communication, communication. You've heard that all day long. It's so important. The city clerk indicated to me in past elections with previous election directors, she could put an email, phone call, text immediately to the right people and get a response very quickly. In this particular election, she put in request of information and actually sometimes did not hear back. So that's a problem. Communication is going to be a big problem, a big room for improvement. Second is, and I mentioned this the last time I spoke, sample ballots. Our city clerk reviews one sample ballot, and actually it's a list of names of candidates for city council, and it represents one precinct, and I really feel that if you provided that list of names for all precincts within the city, she would be able to catch a mistake that was made this year in the primary election where not all candidates were listed in all precincts. And we had that same problem 2 years ago. So something needs to be done in that area. And I know that city clerks are willing and ready to help, and so I think you should take advantage of them whenever possible. In past elections, she indicated that city clerks were highly relied on in order to make sure that the information was correct and communications were straightforward. You've heard a lot on the training aspects. City clerks have always been included in past elections in the training. They bring forward a lot of good information as well. I would encourage you to include city clerks in that. Communications with the candidates in past elections, past election directors. The clerk was the one who communicated with candidates, and I encourage you to make that be the same. This year we had Pinal County communicating with city candidates, and that got confusing for them. And then lastly, we're not sure if this is something that can be changed, but our city clerk feels like with the number of mail-in ballots, 12 polling places in the city of Maricopa is too many, and we don't know if there's a state statute that dictates that, but if you could look at that and reduce the number of polling places, which reduces the number of poll workers required, that would be helpful as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Next up, we have Beverly Goldstein.
Good afternoon, Chairman McClure and all the supervisors and my supervisor, Mike Goodman, whom I've not personally met yet. I am a new resident in Cantera in Queen Creek. I provided you with a 5-page document of everything I wanted to say. My incident report serving as a poll worker I live in Precinct 28, and I worked at the polls as a clerk in 28. And I am not going to repeat what everyone said, because what I came today to do is talk about some suggestions for moving forward. So I'm going to read my statement into the record. I realize that population changes are happening throughout Arizona and likely more rapidly in Pinal County than in other areas of the state. We thought we were moving to an area of the county that not a lot of people knew about, and following moving here, we found out that we moved to one of the greatest developing areas of the country. So a decade or two ago, Pinal people knew Pinal people, and now things were not so complex, but now they are, and with our projected growth, it will only increase in complexity. I did provide this report also to Virginia and to Dana. The Board of Supervisors needs to enact revised and additional county ordinances with regard to the entire voting process. The first ordinance that should be passed is to require the recorder and elections director to identify and list on our county website absolutely every candidate running for office, from county on to town, cities, unincorporated areas, school boards, and courts. Rebecca Padilla had signs on Gansel Road, but I didn't know who she was, and I couldn't figure out what office she was running for. So about 6 weeks before the election, I went to the recorder's office on Bella Vista and Schneps, and I went in and I asked, I'm a brand new resident here. Oh, I'm out of time and I've hardly covered anything. Well, there are 12 recommendations. I hope you take a very serious look at them. The main concluding recommendation is that we have somebody living in our county, Earl Dorr, who could put improving our training on steroids. I spent the day with Earl. He was the marshal where I was a clerk. I am a former poll worker, poll observer. I ran for Congress twice in Cuyahoga County in Ohio, in a district that was heavily the other party of mine. I think that everything that went wrong is fixable. It's fixable because we didn't do here what happened in 2020 that I watched on TV in Maricopa County. We just had a messed up election, okay? You guys, you're our guys. You got to be the guys who are going to be watching this. I have suggestions in here of things like having a liaison employee between each one of you and either Dana or Virginia, probably Virginia, so that you actually have someone you're interacting with weekly, daily, where you don't have to look at everything, but you are engaged. So I spent hours putting these ideas together. I would ask you to take 10 minutes and read them. And thank you very much. I have loved moving here, and I plan to spend the rest of my life here, and I want good elections. So shape it up.
Thank you for your
And
comment.
thank you very much for allowing me to address you today.
Thank you for coming. Michael Goldstein.
Chairman McClure, Vice Chair Surdy, can't read it too well, and honorable members of the board. Michael Goldstein, Queen Creek, and I'm an attorney, not admitted in Arizona yet. But I've been a poll observer for about the last 15 years in midterm and presidential elections, as well as a poll worker. So I came in as a poll observer here to see what was, just to use my experience. What I found was everything seemed to go very smoothly where I was in Precinct 88. People's identifications were checked. There were no problems. There was no waiting. We got short on ballots about in the afternoon, but we never ran out. More were delivered about 4 o'clock. When the doors closed, the inspector came over to talk to me, and I have a report, an incident report attached to my form here. And basically I said, well, how did it go? And she explained to me, to my shock, that about 250 ballots in the municipal elections would not be counted because there were problems with them. People that cast ballots, they wouldn't be counted. And it just left me pretty breathless because I was looking at a town council race with 4 people running for 3 seats, and if 250 ballots were not counted, we had a big problem on our hands, and I had no idea how that could be corrected, except maybe in November. But it didn't make any sense to me that it happened. She also told me that her training as an inspector was less than great, and I think there was just a mix-up in the ballots people were given. I don't know. So I think it ought to be looked into, and I hope it doesn't have any effect on the election itself. But I have her name and phone number in my written report if anybody wants to talk to her. And I was glad for the opportunity to continue being a poll observer. Hopefully I will do that in the future too. But thank you very much. I'm not even going to go to Red. And I'm married to her, and it's wonderful, and we love living here.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for coming. Roberto Ravelis.
Roberto Ravelis, resident of Gold Canyon. First of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and members of the public, the poll workers. They deserve our thanks for what they have been contributing to the public. I listened intently to County Attorney Volkmer's proposal going forward for an administrative review, and I applaud his recommending an outside expert council on elections. I think that is very critically important in the regaining of the public's trust in America's institutions and Pinal County's elections. However, going forward, if there are pieces of information that lead to the need for a criminal investigation, I strongly disagree with the idea that Sheriff Mark Lamb's agency would have anything to do with it. He is notoriously infamous as a promoter of the big lie, and so I encourage the board, going forward, please turn any investigation that may result to an outside agency like the Department of Public Safety. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the rest of my time to you.
Thank you. And you stayed in the green. I'm impressed. Thank you very much. All right. Next, we have Pamela Bradshaw.
Hi, I'm Pamela Bradshaw, and I live in Apache Junction. I am precinct captain for 59, and that's where I served as a poll worker. At that time, we had 2 express vote machines. Only one worked. We had 2 poll pads. Those were great. At the end of the night, we weren't told they were supposed to be batched out, so guess what? They were all neatly put in their little bag before they were batched out because our person was so fed up with people being upset that they had not been able to vote. So she neglected to tell us that. I worked at the ballot boxes, I worked at the table, I worked as the poll pads, and 5 minutes at the ballots. We had a stack of municipal ballots, 800 of them. I counted them in at the beginning. At the end of the night, we had 775 of them. Now, the Republican ballots, we ran out of those at 12 o'clock. We were told after the lady who was our inspector had been on the phone for hours trying to find out when we were going to get ballots. She was told they would come at 5 o'clock. We had people coming back. They were PO'd because they were not there. I had set up 3 other tables of the provisional ballots for people to sit around and vote at. They were upset that they had to sit right next to one another to do their voting, but at least they got to vote. We finally got our ballots at 6 o'clock, a whole 25 ballots. They were gone at 6:20 in the afternoon. Everybody was running, trying to get over to the place so they could vote with these ballots. They were very upset. We had watchers that would call and try to get somebody to answer the phone. You know what they got? This number has been disconnected. That was what they got on the end of their phone. I appreciate that you have Virginia and Dana. I hope you get somebody to take Virginia's place whenever she decides that she's leaving that is as good, if not more stellar, than what she is. I also had a person bring in 2 mail-in ballots. She had heard on the television that we were out of ballots, and she was trying to do her due diligence and bring one in for somebody else to use. I had the lady sitting next to me at the pad say, "What's that ballot doing over there?" after this other lady had filled it out and put it in the ballot box. I said, "She brought that in trying to help." She goes, "Well, tear that up because we don't want to deal with it at the end of the night." While that lady wasn't looking, I took a picture of that so we would know, why does this lady get 2 ballots? She needs to not have 2 ballots. That's about it. I appreciate you letting me talk. Please get this fixed.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, Michelle Farrell.
Morning, gentlemen. It's been a morning.
Could you please state your name and
Yes, my name is
generally
Michelle Farrell. I live in Santan Valley. I'm actually in Supervisor Guzman District now, I think. I think we've had a lot of identification of problems, some good solutions to go forward with. It seems we've got a couple distinct areas here, one of which is we're still having an issue with information dissemination delivery. Again, you know, the printing of the ballots, et cetera, and then in person for the lack of ballots and getting them in place. Also training seems to be there, some IT work, some data point work so far as within your systems that could possibly solve some issues in regards to your GIS systems for people in and out of municipalities, where they belong, where they don't belong, even so far as correct addressings, et cetera. So I'm sure your IT guys will be more than happy to go through all that gamut with you and everything else. Appreciate you giving people a chance to speak. I think it's important. I think we do need to keep in mind that this is a Pinal issue. It doesn't necessarily cascade out of Pinal from the sounds of it. It is solely within our county. And I don't know that that necessarily has been relayed adequately enough to calm people's concerns that, you know, it is an isolated issue for this round, that it is unfortunately been due to a lack of what seems to be contingency planning, preparedness, et cetera. Unfortunately, bucks roll and stop, and I'm afraid that does essentially end up here. But you guys are trying to fix it, which is a bright point. But we got to keep going forward from this, find your way, look at your data points. That is a way to automate. Like, for example, they said they have a formula that is state statute, I believe. Ms. Ross said that why is that not encoded to where at a minimum, your residence plus one certain percentage for your ballot printing is automatically there, that's your minimum, regardless of what anybody else goes through inside, social media, messaging, whatever, you would have your minimum ballots there, according to your statute, if it was programmatic, if it was in your programs. There's no reason for that to be on a spreadsheet versus within your databases that it automatically goes when it comes to time. And then you adjust from there as you see the need to be. Possible solutions there, possible things to look at. Everybody's got some good suggestions, some not so good that it happens for both sides. Thank you much.
Thank you for your time. Kevin O'Reilly.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Kevin O'Reilly, and I live in northern Santan Valley. First of all, thank you for having this meeting. It answered many of my questions. My suggestion would be that after the November elections, you have another meeting to help restore confidence, what went right, what went wrong. Second thing I'd like to say is if the board has not already done so, I'd like to hear the board say that it is their intent to release the administrative review report unredacted. I think it's critical that the public get the full report. Third thing I would like to say is I vote at Harmon Elementary, which is in Pecan Creek. It's the Link Estates Precinct. And specific to what Supervisor Goodman said, indeed, even though I went on the websites trying to see if there was any part of that precinct in Queen Creek, it appeared to me there was not. And yet, on the ballot, the last couple of questions were Queen Creek. And had it not caught my eye, I would have voted for it. And to me, for you, the county, to give me a ballot with stuff on it I shouldn't be voting on is absolutely wrong. I looked around before I left. There were people flipping the ballot over, and it looked like they were marking their votes. And through no fault of their own. Somebody gives me a ballot, I assume I'm supposed to fill out for every election. So that's just, it was wrong on the county's part. And I can't imagine Queen Creek's position. How many of those votes turned out to be invalid and could have possibly changed one of their elections? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your observations. All right. Joyce Klein.
Good morning. I'm Joyce Klein. I live in the outskirts of Florence in the rural area. This was my first time as a poll watcher in Precinct 22, which is in Casa Grande at the fairgrounds. So I was anxious for my new appointment. I very much want to be helpful as a citizen. So I arrived at 6 o'clock when the polls were to open. There were people waiting outside. The doors were not open yet. Signage was not up. We kept getting apologies, and one of the persons inside, thankful to this community, was Dana Lewis. She was there as a citizen to cast her vote and found things totally in disarray. Equipment was not set up. They hadn't inventoried all the ballots. They didn't realize that they did not have Republican ballots. So it was some time later they sent a courier back to, I believe, Coolidge at first, but then apparently to Florence to get ballots. There were some people who left without casting their vote. There was a senior couple who had concerns because they had other appointments scheduled, but it was important to them that they cast their citizens' votes that day, so they waited, and it was about 8:45 or so before we got those ballots. The electronic equipment was not set up. They were missing parts, and again, Dana was working frantically, not only to get to her assigned workday schedule, but trying to help the two individuals there who were than trying to set up their precinct to help the people in their community to cast their votes. So I know you've heard this repetition of these problems. I just want to say, while I was sitting there, some I say customers because that's my background, people who were waiting to vote would try to approach me. What could they do? Or I say, I'm sorry, I'm just here as an observer. I referred them to the inspector or the people, the other single lady who was manning the polls. They were very frustrated. I would have been too. I had to leave before the polls closed so that I could get to my polling place and cast my own ballot. The inspector shared with me that she was very concerned. She'd been trying to get some answers because she and the only other individual helping her at this station were of the same party. And she was concerned how people might perceive the closing out of the day. I wasn't familiar with what all that process was, but she wanted some help because she was concerned about the double custody type concerns for the ballots.
Can you please wrap up? Because your time is
all right. So that's pretty much it. It's just that as I'm sitting here and seeing these ladies struggle to do their due diligence in their job, and I'm sitting back thinking, this is totally inexcusable. 100%. Whoever's responsible for these elections, whether it's yourself, your staff, completely failed this county. And I'm new to this county, but they totally inexcusable. And I've done some fair amount of managing work myself, and I thought somebody needs to go because this is totally inexcusable. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Thank you for your time. Marcia Habijanak? Did I butcher that? Yes. Okay. Okay. Oh, Marcia Smith. All the letters are silent. That's
yes,
okay.
That's right. Good afternoon there. My name is Marcia Bovey Habijanik. And I am in the county island of Apache Junction, and I work for Precinct 46, Desert Schools. This was the biggest botched election I have ever worked, and I've been doing this for 20 years. I have not missed one election. And when you consider that Pinal County, under Gilbert, I can't remember his last name, Pinal taught other counties and states how to run efficient elections. That's how good we were 20 years ago. What's happened? The training was a joke. Even the manuals were insufficient. I had to locate an old manual that I had in my file cabinet to get the information that I needed. If you attended the physical on-site training, there was no demonstration on the poll pads nor the express machines, and that was a new machine for all of us. We didn't know how to even operate them. And since I had my training online, I wasn't even aware of these new machines. Primary day, trying to get a hold of anybody was almost impossible. No one would answer their phones. During a continuous, stressful 14-hour day, maybe 3 times our instructor was able to get a hold of someone. And one time he texted with no response. We have over 2,200 voters in our precinct. This is what we got as a delivery for ballots. 100 Republican, 50 Democrats, 300 municipal, and absolutely 0, nada, for the express machine, which were delivered at 11 o'clock, 3 hours after opening, along with our provisional envelopes, which we had absolutely none, except for municipal, and that was in an orange highlighter at the top. So we requested, when the troubleshooters stopped by, we asked them, could we please have some more Republican ballots? We are running low. And we did. We ran out by 11:30. By 2:30, 3 hours later, we got an additional 23 ballots, Republican ballots. unexcusable, absolutely ridiculous. There is not one reason for any of that. Not one. Not one. The poll pads, early voters weren't even entered into the poll pads. We had no idea if somebody was coming in and they were an early voter and they were voting a second time. We had no idea. Unless they said, oh, I got an early ballot, but I really want to do it in person. That's the only time we knew somebody was an early ballot. Then we had absolutely no instructions for how to close the poll pad. None. Nothing. And you had to get in there to get the report for the listing of how many voters you had for your individual place. We didn't know how to do it. We had to, somebody was very technical with the computers, and they were able to say, try one of these. So we did, and we figured out how to get the poll list into the official ballot. So I have to ask, how can so many issues be a problem this election time? How is it possible? Why wasn't there overseers double checking everything? Or was it intentional? And that's what I have to ask. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Darrell Cross. No comments from the crowd, please.
My name is Darrell Cross. Fortunately to be elected to the City Council in Apache Junction. And what a mess. Makes me wonder and makes me ask the question, did we hire, or did you guys hire the most qualified individual to run our election? Or did you hire the cheapest individual to run our election? Seems like either answer fits. I don't know, you know. At Precinct 45, 8:30 in the morning, I was made aware that there's 2 municipal ballots inside that people were voting on. I said, how can that be? Why should there be 2 different municipal ballots? I went in to observe, asked them to see the 2 different ballots, and sure enough, on one ballot, it had a space directly underneath the mayor's votes for a write-in candidate, specifically for a 2-year term. On the other ballot, which was designated for nonpartisan electors or nonpartisan voters, there was no spot for a write-in candidate. Brought that to county officials' attention, and within a half hour, we were told that all the ballots that had that were lacking that write-in spot were not going to be used anymore, and only the other ballots were being used. So we have a whole bunch of ballots for the first 2.5 hours that are identified as having a purple rectangle on them. Were those votes actually counted, and did those votes count? What about the individual that was trying to get in as a write-in candidate? How many votes did he lose because somebody couldn't write his name in because there was no spot for it? Obviously, there's lots of lack of training. Like the Mayor Chip Wilson stated, the first 2 hours of a couple precincts, they didn't even hand out a municipal ballot unless you actually asked for it. It just blows my mind. It's appalling. I want to be able to go back to the people in Apache Junction, those that voted for me, maybe those that didn't vote for me. I want to be able to assure them that this general election coming up is going to be fair, that it's going to be true, that they can trust that the system is fixed, and that their vote is actually going to count. And I hope to God, and I pray to God, that you guys can get this fixed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Kelly Townsend.
Good afternoon. For the record, Senator Kelly Townsend, District 16, from Apache Junction. I don't want to talk about overturning an election. I don't want to talk about an effort that what we're trying to do is say that this candidate should have won instead of that candidate. What I'm here to talk to you about is the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment has an equal protection clause in it, that we treat every citizen the same. We don't treat people differently. And I think after what we've heard here today, no one can argue that the people who voted in the morning were not treated differently than the people who voted in the afternoon or the evening. People were met with a different situation, and their right to vote was denied. The question is, how many were denied the right to vote? What I keep hearing from legal counsel is, well, it's not enough to change any of the elections. First of all, it doesn't matter. If one person's vote was denied, that's a 14th Amendment violation, and we should be doing everything we can to help that one person be restored, their rights restored, one. But let's look. So far, no one's been able to give an accurate number of how many were denied. So what I've done is I looked at voter turnout, average based on counties, based on the top number of counties. Maricopa County's the voter turnout was 35%. Pima, 36%. Yavapai, to their credit, a whopping 52%. Gila, 47%. Pinal, 28%. So if you take the other four and you average, what's the average turnout from those other four is 43%. So let's do math in our heads. If you're going to try and figure out how many people 43% would have been if they showed up and were allowed to vote, 43% of the 275,000 people in Pinal County that are registered voters would have been 118,291 people would have cast a ballot if 43% had turned out to vote. Bless you. 28% is 77,026. That is a difference of 41,264 people not casting a ballot compared to the average voter turnout. That's a significant number. That's not a small, insignificant number. That is a very significant number. That is enough to overturn other elections in the state. The governor's race was a span of 40,000 in the Republican primary. The Democrat Secretary of State was a span of 28,000. John Fillmore's race, he lost by 2,000. Mine doesn't matter. I lost by 7,800, so I don't think it's going to do anything on mine. But Mr. Leach lost by 2,000. If you ask yourself how many, if we had a 2% amount of voters that didn't get to cast a ballot because, just 2%, not going all the way up to 43, but just going from 28% to 30%, how many voters would that be? Only a 2% increase in the number of voters would have been 5,502. That impacts both Senator Leach and Representative Fillmore. So it does impact races, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to restore the rights of the people who were denied the ability to vote. The question is, do they have standing? They absolutely have standing. One person denied the right to vote has standing under the 14th Amendment. Not under whether or not they were impacted or whatever. What's the harm to that person? The harm, speaking legally, is their 14th Amendment right. Is it a big deal if your Second Amendment right is harmed? Is it a big deal if your First Amendment right is harmed? It's a big deal if your 14th Amendment right is harmed as equally as it is the others.
Can you please wrap up?
I will wrap it up. I'm disappointed. Many of you knew that I had an injunction filed. Many of you knew that I was serving you at 8 o'clock on Friday morning, and I did. Somehow that was delayed and didn't get to you, and I am aware that you were advised to not discuss my injunction during your meeting on Friday. You didn't need to canvass this until yesterday, but you knew about my injunction. You knew that this could have been overturned. You knew people's rights were violated, and you chose to move forward as fast as possible and canvass this election. I came in here to do this to help you. When we came and you had that press conference, you said you needed someone to go to the courts so that the courts could help you not have to canvass this, so I did it. And I feel like there's been games played, and you fast-tracked this. You were told that if you didn't vote, that you could be held liable. And
okay, I'm going to ask you to stop.
I'm sorry, but as your senator, I need to tell you, you have potentially 40,000 people who are asking to join a class action lawsuit, who rights were violated. I'm disappointed in all of you, my friends. You broke my heart.
Okay, Kathleen Wynn.
Sorry. I don't live in Pinal County. I was hoping to represent, and I lost my election. But on election day, I received well over 50 calls, 100 emails. I documented as much as I could. I'm not going to reiterate everything we've heard. That would be cruel and unusual punishment. But what we do know is that there were so many polling places that did not receive the number of ballots that they needed. But I heard as low as 25, I've heard as high as 37. But we should know at this point how many polling places did not receive ballots. To Senator Townsend's point, we know who voted. We know how many people voted early ballots and showed up at the polling places. What we don't know is how many people were eligible to vote but didn't vote. I think I would beg you to get that number, because otherwise we are going to be throwing out numbers, and I would ask this Board of Supervisors to provide how many people were eligible to vote that did not vote. Doesn't mean they showed up at a polling place, but we should identify that number so that we know exactly in the polling places where there were not ballots, where people showed up and could not vote, we know how many people. I think you need to do that as a math problem and as a statistical analysis. It's not emotional, it's factual. And you have the ability, Dana, I talked to her before this, says you can do that. We don't want Pinal County to be the place where people don't trust to vote, and you have to do everything you can to restore confidence with the voters here. I had people out at polls that day, had worked hard on my campaign for a year, and were so discouraged and demoralized because they couldn't help the people vote. I don't even care about my election in this. I care about the fact that there's 3 amendments in the Constitution, also 15, 19, and 24, that talk about the right to vote. So we have to restore confidence if you do nothing else. I think the changes you're making are good ones, but you have to break this down and get all the data out that was presented here in a factual report, and I think you as a county need to report it out to the voters. I thank you for the opportunity to address you today. Thank you.
Thank you. We have, it looks like Courtney Ramirez.
Good day, everybody. I am coming here as a taxpayer, as a citizen of Florence, and I really cannot believe that we are here in today's day and age in 2022 talking about elections. This is so un-American that we are even having election problems. Honestly, it feels like we're in communist China. Like our voting, the whole program is messed up. And I think we can still argue that 2020 was botched. And now we're here with wrong ballots and people being denied. I mean, didn't we learn of what happened in 2020? This is sad. This is a sad day in America. It's a sad day in Pinal County. And we are all wondering what the heck is going on, and how is something so sacred as our voting so botched and corrupt? In my opinion, this is interference with elections. It's not just simple errors. in my humble opinion, it is interference with elections, and it has to be fixed. I know so many people that didn't even come out and vote because they still think 2020 was botched. Many people that don't want to exercise their right to vote because they don't think it's going to be heard, let alone being denied the opportunity to vote come voting day. This is America. And we are still having problems with our voting, our sacred right to vote. And I just hope to God that whoever the power, I know David Frisk wasn't the only one involved. He is not the only one. There's a chain of command with everything. And, right now we can all feel he's a scapegoat. But I really hope that you guys, our attorneys, everybody, our sheriff, does anything and everything they can to get to the bottom of what happened fast, because nobody trusts the system anymore. It's all corrupt politicians. And this is, we're electing these officials, right? It's our sacred right to vote to elect these officials who tell us what to do. That's essentially what elections are. We're the people. And our voices aren't even being heard on election day. That is not American. And I'm the only voter. I think, so many of these people, where's the voters that even care? Why don't people even care? People have lost faith in what it means to be an American. So I really hope that anybody and everybody involved with this botched election gets fired. I hope we see public arrest, and I hope people go to jail immediately, because I know David Frisk wasn't the only one. Right now, he just took the fall. So we want it fixed, and we want to feel like we are back in America, in the land of the free, with our sacred rights to vote being 100% protected. These aren't innocent mistakes. This is interference with elections. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any others that wish to speak that are not on the list?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. My name is Vicki McLaughlin. I'm the District 5 Chairman in Apache Junction. I'm not going to go over the whole program again. Everything that's been stated, I think, in many of the precincts I visited, happened, all of them, in the same precinct. What I do want to say, though, is I spent 16 and a half hours traveling from pole to pole to pole in Apache Junction and Gold Canyon and Queen Valley. And I want to thank the poll workers and the poll observers. I was so proud of these people that we sent out untrained, without supplies, with things that didn't work. I heard the stories about bolt cutters and being locked out and all of that, but they stayed and they met the public. And I feel these people are the real heroes of that election day. They stayed there, they met and calmed angry American voters. So I hope that all of us really, really say thank you to our poll workers and poll observers. Having said that, I would also like to say that I spent 2 weeks observing at the early voting process in the Apache Junction Recorder's Office. With all of us that did observe there, it was the consensus. There's no problem at the Apache Junction Recorder's Office. They had all their procedures down. They checked them, rechecked them, and checked them again. The staff was very conscientious. The tasks, procedures, everything was constantly rechecked. It was an organized and consistent office. They're always under their eyes of a very strong inspector who is our recorder. So all of us felt they did a good job. With that, we also felt that the early voting process was way too long, because in many cases we sat there and watched for hours and there wasn't anybody showing up to vote. The people that voted probably could have done it in a week. All of the things that have been mentioned, as I had said, were mentioned. I have also on my report. One of the things I did hear was the storm was part of the cause, the big storm we had the night before, or shortly before, so for the setup times. We had poor signage. Oops, and I'm out of time, so I'm going to apologize. But I've been a poll observer for 11 years. The signage at the same precinct, which is 42, we had a voter come in who was upset. He went out and bought materials, made a sign or signs, came back and put them up in hopes that voters could find it. It has a ironwood address, and you get in on Broadway. So I just thought I'm going to say it here, so hopefully it gets taken care of. But thank you for paying attention, and I hope this does, in fact, get fixed. And thank you for putting Virginia Ross and Dana Lewis in these positions. If anybody can do it, they can. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all that spoke today. Oh, I'm sorry. Any others that care to speak?
I'm Carol Lee Bailey. I live in Saddlebrook Ranch. I'm the PCRC District 1 Chair and President of the Saddlebrook Ranch Republican Women of Action. I want to go back to Kelly Townsend and what she was talking about, voter disenfranchised. I want to read you the first hour in Oracle from our outside poll observer. At 6 a.m., the poll doors opened, and the lady stood there and said, "Okay, you can come in." And in the background, somebody was yelling, "No, they can't." They shut the doors, and 8 people were told to go home. At 6:12, there were some people that still hung around, and they told they could come in and vote if they wanted to use a provisional ballot. At 6:18, a couple was turned away. At 6:23, another couple was turned away. At 6:26, a voter decided he would vote provisional. At 6:28, one voter voted provisionals. 2 others decided to wait, and they sat at a picnic table in the parking lot. At 6:33, another person was turned away. At 6:43, they turned away another person, and a second couple decided to sit at the picnic table to wait. At 7:02, the polls opened. And it went downhill from that because by 10:30 in the morning, they were out of ballots. So I'm not going to go through all the rest of the disasters that happened in southern Pinal. I was beginning to think that we were sort of like the outback of Australia, that nobody cared about us down there because they just left us with this mess. But after listening today, I realize it's a county-wide problem. As a positive for in the future, I suggest that when they do the training manuals and train these people, that there is a burgeoning problem that's appearing. I've noticed it throughout the years that I've been poll observing, and that is the etiquette, the interaction between the poll observers and the poll workers. There is mass confusion about how they should regard each other. And to bring it home, I'm going to name some of the comments I heard from my poll observers on that day. There was no place to sit except in the far corner, and I couldn't hear or see anything. An early observer in another precinct was told they have to sit 30 feet away from the tables. She did, and she could not see anything that was going on. After the last voter left, this was at 7 at night, the poll observer moved forward to watch them close up, to watch the inspector, to see what they were locking up the boxes. And they said, "You can't come up here, go back." And they made her move back, so she couldn't watch the process.
Ms. Bailey, can you wrap up because your time is up?
Okay. I want you, as the Board of Supervisors, to know that there's going to be fallout from this. Many of us in the communities have had our eyes opened even wider to the incompetency of the government of Pinal County. David Frisk is just your scapegoat. What about Leo Liu, who hires all these people? What about the department heads and the management of these various departments? Where were they in managing this county? People are talking about this, and there is going to be fallout from this good old boy network. That's how it's becoming known. So get used to that term, because that is what the perception is. Pinal County is growing. It's positive. There are a lot of educated, dynamic people here, and they're not going to watch the good old boy network do as they've always done. We're not going to fall for, okay, David Frisk is gone.
Please wrap up your comments.
And
Ms.
it's
Bailey.
over, because it's not.
Thank you. Are there any others? Yes.
My name is Nola Perkins, and I live in Apache Junction. And I didn't put in a request to speak because I didn't intend to speak today, because everybody has said everything that needs to be said. You know, it's a mess, and that's it. I am so sad and disappointed. Our county has become a laughingstock of the nation, and I am just too sad about that. But what I came to speak for, and I didn't intend to, is what is this thing that was handed to us when we were in here? It says elections timeline from the Office of Supervisor Kavanaugh. I don't understand what it is and why it was handed to us. Does anybody know? I showed it to Jeff, and he had not seen it before.
We'll be able to comment when everybody's through, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to tell me what it's about?
Are there any others that wish to address the board before I move on here? Seeing and hearing none. Are there any comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Kavanaugh.
I think my staff put together a timeline of the actions taken by the board and so on, so that people could do their own research, go back and watch the meetings with respect to elections and so on. So that's the timeline of everything that we could find that any board member had taken action on, or meetings and so on. So it's just an informational for the public.
I'm a bit disappointed that you decided to hand it out in a meeting, but thank you for explaining. Are there any other comments?
From us?
From us. From you.
Okay. Yeah, I've got quite a few notes myself, so.
Just, as an overview of all this, the telephones can do so much good, and the phones just got to be. And, about running a lean department, this is no time to be lean. The county's growing. If any department needs to be better taken care of, it's obviously this department, because this is such a sacred right, and this can never happen again because of that. And the trucks that went out, very slow and inefficient. We need like a fleet of vans. Now, I learned that each one has to have two different people in it, so that there's two sets of eyes on everything. So we need to have that, if this happens again, to be able to adapt with, to go to Casa Grande to Apache Junction to Saddlebrook. I mean, that's just an amazing distance there. So we got to be way more efficient on all that. Besides, what else we heard. So those are my three biggest observations from this.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Goodman.
Yeah. First of all, Kelly, I agree with you as far as the 14th Amendment and things that you talked about there. Fortunately, it does fall under us, the five of us. That's the bottom line. And I think, and so as far as comment was made to request my resignation, not going to happen. I'm going to see that this is corrected and taken care of. One of the biggest mistakes we did was we hired somebody that was totally incompetent. Let's be real here. Okay? Now, this is my turn. You've had your turn. Right, Chairman?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the other part is, was there some proper training to help him and assist him? I'm not for sure, especially somebody coming from a state, another state that wasn't familiar with our laws, and especially with some of the elections taking place here. We haven't had any. I've heard many of you talk about how you've been poll workers for years. And if you weren't properly trained this time, why? And were you properly trained before? Was that brought to the attention of anybody out there to make sure that that was done? And how, because I don't even know whenever the training even began. My part in this began whenever we were notified that there was misprints in the early ballots and how they went out. And I was appalled at how did this happen? And so when we looked at it, we sat down. First of all, how did that happen? We are responsible for all of these different districts and municipalities. They contract with us to run these elections. Where was the redundancy in checking all of these ballots to make sure that they're right? Somebody mentioned their town clerks. We need more involvement of communication there. As I'm sitting back listening to everything here, we need more involvement with all the districts and everybody else to have input and make sure those ballots are accurate before they even go out. And now let's talk about a little bit about once the mistake was discovered, there was a process that we as a county, a board, along with the city representatives, their clerk office and everything else, legally came up with an option working with the AG's office and our Secretary of State to make sure, what do we need to do? All the cities communicated, this is what's going to happen. And then we find out that it wasn't even properly trained to the people that were supervisors of the different precincts. My morning started out at 7:30 in the morning going to cast my ballot. I get an early ballot. And my wife and I went to our precinct. And as soon as I walked into the door, I heard from the corner of my ear the supervisor telling one of my constituents that they didn't have any ballots at 7:30 in the morning at my precinct. I gave her my credentials, told her who I was, and she proceeded to tell me that there was 11 other people that they had already gave that information and told them there wasn't enough ballots and that they needed to come back. And that the information they were getting was that it was being printed. Then I went from that particular precinct, and I went from precinct to precinct in my district, proceeding to find out what the hell was going on. And I'm sorry for my language, but that's really what this has all come out. And so the frustration of all of that. And then, so first of all, so the second part is, why was there not enough ballots? We've never had that problem in the past. Why now? Again, we hire these people, these supervisors, these individuals that are supposed to be experts in what their roles and responsibilities are, and we give them the tools to go forth and do that. And if they don't have the tools, and this should be a message for all of our departments, if you don't have the tools to run your department, you need to come before us as a board. We control the budgets and everything else. That's a known fact. But we cannot operate under the circumstances this is a perfect example. And I beg to differ whenever saying there's something that this is not just unique to our county. I guarantee you. Because we've become complacent as a whole throughout the entire nation. People don't even come and vote anymore because they just don't engage. Why they don't engage, I don't understand it. But the bottom line is, we've become so complacent as a nation that we just kind of let this thing go the direction that it's gone. So personally, I think we all have some responsibility here to help this thing move forward. I commend all of our poll workers. Man, when I went around and the crap they had to deal with, and I personally was trying to help the situation. I can remember talking in one of the polls that I went to, there was almost 60 people waiting to vote. And this is like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm telling the people, we're trying to print them as quick as we can. Please don't leave. Your vote is important. It's important to us. Please don't leave. They're being printed. And put it out there. Let people know. If you're here by 7 o'clock, we'll make sure they get the vote. I don't care how we're going to do this, but we'll get it done. My precinct, I went back a follow-up where my precinct is at 9 o'clock at night, and they were just locking up. That's the location where there was 2 incidences, and one of them had to be arrested. And that's what Sheriff Lamb was talking about. This was in a school. At a school. With all the crap and everything that our schools are dealing with now, and this is in front of our kids, this stuff happened. My wife witnessed it. She saw it all happen. And so I think we need to look at the possibility of pulling these for the safety of our kids because of how heated everything is now in the environment as a whole, that we need to pull this out of the schools and find different locations for these. Now, that's even going to even make more confusion for people. But I honestly believe we need to look at that as an option because I'm telling you, we have a meeting with one of the superintendents from one of our schools to discuss this very thing because there was something said about somebody waving a gun on Election Day at the school. Now, I don't know if that was true or not. Sheriff Lamb's been looking into it, but the bottom line is there's so much fiasco, and this is on our watch. I get it, but the frustration that I have, and then this right here that was handed out to you, let me tell you something. You need to find out what this is all about because I'm looking at this, and you know, when under Michelle Forty, when she was running the elections, she did a great job. And then when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at, anyway, find out. We need to have some more discussions about this darn thing right here. Because this, as a member of our board, that presented this should be investigated, even looked at to its fullest extent and have some complete discussion around this right here. Yeah, where is he? He's on the phone.
I'm here on the phone, Mr. Goodman.
Wait a minute, I'm not done yet, sir. I'm not done yet.
Supervisor Kavanaugh. Supervisor Kavanaugh, Supervisor Goodman has the floor still.
Right, but protocols with Robert's rules, we don't attack.
We don't do Robert's rules here, Mr. Kavanaugh, so please be quiet for a minute and let Mr. Goodman finish.
So, and to the point is why all this right here? So I'd like to have further explanation on that. But let's go back to polling observers. Number one, how are they chosen? How are they appointed to go in? You know, I got a call late at night. It was probably about 10 o'clock at night, saying that we didn't have there was no Republican observers at the elections department. We had no Republican observers at the elections department. So I made a phone call to Kathy Nowak, and she tells me she had turned in all kinds of names of people that volunteered. What happened? Where did the breakdown occur there? Why was nobody there? So I quickly jumped in the vehicle. Kent Volk, our county attorney, was there, and I left about 2:30 in the morning. Mr. Volkmer was there. Our county attorney was there till probably about 3:30. My eyes were open to a lot of things in our elections department and the things that's been taking place over just this one fiasco that we've been through. But the point is that based on where we're headed right now and what's going on with the appointment of the two individuals that we've done immediately and with the suggestions that are being made, I absolutely feel very confident that we're moving in the right direction to get us where we need to be. We need some follow-ups. Somebody mentioned complete transparency on some of these things, especially when it comes to what we're going to find out from Mr. Nelson, the consultant that we're going to hire. As this information comes out, I think we really need to look at and evaluate everything and put it out in the public. And, Supervisor Surdy has always said, and I appreciate that, we need to be transparent with the people because our main goal is to put back the integrity of our elections. But that's just not here. We should be a poster child for other locations to be looking at what not to do and start doing the things, what they need to be doing to really straighten out the elections department across this nation. And so that's the other thing is somebody mentioned 65,000 wrong addresses. I think that was a misunderstanding. There was 63,000 early ballots that went out that were not wrong, but the addresses, it was the ballot themselves. It was that transferring. That's the part. I wanted to make sure that's clarified. As far as early voting, somebody said something about we need to change that from the 30 days down to 15 days. I had asked our county attorney to look into that and kind of give us some, is that possible for us to do that ruling, or is that state?
Chair, Board, with respect to that very specific question, ARS 16-541A requires that the county shall provide early voting. We don't have any say in that. And then if you read 16-542, 545, and 544, it requires by law that eligible voters that request a mailed ballot are entitled to a ballot by mail between 27 and 24 days before the election. We do not have the authority to deny them that. That is a right that is found in our state statutes. Obviously, the state statutes could be changed, but we would be violating the law if we did not comply with it. So I know a suggestion was, can we make it 15 days, 10 days? No, the state statutes do not allow that at this time.
But it does allow us, if I might, it does allow us to shrink it down to the 24-day. Did I hear that right?
It's 27 to 24. That's what we comply with now.
27 to 24. Okay.
I think 30 is used as a general. It's 27
Right.
days. That's what we currently comply with.
All right, I wanted to make sure I understand that, and so I wasn't for sure, to be honest with you, and so I'm glad you answered that. Then the next thing is I talked about the proofreading by all the districts that really we need to have more of that. Oh, okay, good. Okay.
I just want to clarify, the early voting in person has to be open at 27.
Okay.
So we have to open the polls.
So we're, okay. Okay, thank you, Virginia.
Yes, Virginia clarified.
No
Sorry,
choice.
we doing the best job we can. That was not a question we'd anticipated, so it's more important we get the information right.
And then the last question before you sit down. Wait, go ahead. I'll back you up in a second. We heard there's a lawsuit that's been presented to us. Is there any others out there that have been presented to us as a county, and what's the status on those so far?
Presently, we are a named defendant in only one lawsuit, and that has been originated by Senator Kelly Townsend and Mr. Ross. I apologize, I don't remember his first name. There is a hearing that is scheduled for tomorrow. There is a pending motion to dismiss. I will note, both for this board and for the public and for Ms. Townsend's information, because I've not had a chance to refer or relay this information to her. Based on my communication with the board, we are not seeking attorney's fees, which would typically be something we would seek as a prevailing party. Assuming we win, we're not asking that she be required to pay attorney's fees. And again, that unless the board directs otherwise, that has been the direction that we've received from the board, as this was sort of our mistake.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, I yield.
You yield. Supervisor Kavanaugh, I believe you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this meeting was about informing the public and being transparent, and our staff provided a list of dates where we've discussed elections in the past. That is being transparent. That gives the public the opportunity to review the entire situation. This didn't start 3 months ago. We noticed elections, small errors occurring in elections last year. We noticed that there were not proper protocols in place. The county attorney talked about single points of failure. It looked like that was already happening last year. So we have folks like Michelle Forney, who may have been an expert. And the question is, did we rely exclusively on her knowledge? Do we have protocols in place? We asked for protocols last year. We were given a draft copy. So these things, and as the citizens mentioned today, we as a county need to have very specific protocols in place where we don't have single points of failure. And I think that we can have good elections going forward if we execute on those items. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the board? All right. Supervisor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be brief here. I think one of the slides that Virginia put up at the very beginning of this showed how we had the elections department structured. Very, very thin, very, very not adequate. You can see the new one that comes down that really shows how we've made an attempt here to man this operation at best. So that's quite a difference between the two of those. And this is, hindsight's 20/20. This is probably what needed to be in place for this election. To that point, I'll say when other electeds have come or other departments have come to this Board of Supervisors, I think we've been very, very generous and sympathetic to their situation, provided the resources, which is another word for money, to do what they needed. I think the poll pads was something new for this election. We have a voter van out here. We have, I don't know of anything that we denied when we were asked. Do I know how to run an election? No. I'm a policy guy, and I'm in charge of your tax dollars and spending them, and trying to spend them in the most appropriate way with some good stewardship. But again, back to this department, it's unfortunate that we didn't have something similar to this structure in place. It will be in place, and I don't even know, we won't know until this next election if that's adequate, to be honest with you. This is our best attempt to structure this and see if we can move forward without any hiccups. And again, for any and all departments, this board, I think, has been very generous and is very open-minded to suggestions for any and all departments. This is so unfortunate. I feel really bad. I absolutely understand the 14th Amendment. I think that that's a valid type of argument, but I'll have to rely on legal counsel to guide us through that. That's their responsibility to us. But I just want to tell everyone that certainly this was not something we had planned. And we will, I want you to just kind of see, I think as the county attorney said, watch us moving forward. And I think you'll see that we can get our arms around this and perform on this next election. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the board? I would like to then say, thank you to those that worked on this organizational chart. We talked about this a lot last week, and you came through. If you look at it, there's a lot of people in there, and we keep saying we're going to put them in one building. If you go to elections and recording now, you look, there's not enough room to hardly even stand around, much less walk. So we're discussing building a new building, and it'll be here in the Florence area, probably over by the courthouse, the Superior Courthouse. And we'll have room to grow into it over quite a few years. We'll make it big enough to be able to have the people there that we need, have redundancies. And I come from manufacturing, so we're looking at analysis of the flow of the work and how that works, and then to duplicate that, make a dual production line so that we can count votes faster, we can do everything in more space, have the bandwidth to have the cameras up, have all the things that we need, and for the future. Oh, and a truck that has a top on it. Whoever mentioned that was, yeah, or two. Anyway, so that we are working forward on that, and this has been a grand embarrassment. With that, I would move on to item 2. Discussion, approval, disapproval of the creation of new job classifications for the Elections Department and Recorder's Office. Ms. Shepard.
Chairman McClure, members of the board, Mary Ellen Shepard, Deputy County Manager. We are asking you to approve 2 new classifications for the Elections Department, Deputy Director classification and Elections Manager. These are responsive to input received from Ms. Ross based upon her initial assessment of immediate needs in the Elections Department and as reflected in the organizational chart that has been shared today. We will also be working with Recorder Lewis to bring before you new classifications to meet her office's needs as soon as possible, and we'll continue to work with both of these leaders to ensure they have the staffing and resources needed to serve our community. If you have specific questions related to the duties and responsibilities, I would respectfully defer to Ms. Ross to answer. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board? Supervisor Kavanaugh, are you there?
Yes, I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. I have no questions. In that case, if there's no questions, can I get a motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the 2 positions as presented.
If we can state those position titles.
Okay, here they are right here. That we approve as presented the Elections Department new job classification for Deputy Director and the Elections and Elections Manager.
There you go. I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Could I make a statement now? That
you may, yes.
Now that we've done this, that doesn't mean that it's over. We still want to monitor this and make sure that it's working and tweak it where it needs to be tweaked.
Oh, it's not done.
Yeah, so letting everybody know that.
Okay, and with the, I'm sorry, Supervisor Miller, yes, sir.
I suggest that we have at least once a month a report on how things are going, and maybe just make it one of those routine items on our agenda that we can report to the public how things are proceeding in this area.
And someone suggested an after November meeting as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Is once a month under the circumstances enough?
Probably every board meeting that we have from now till
Okay,
election time,
that's what I'd
there
like
will
to
be
see.
an item
Yeah,
on there to
okay,
talk
good,
about it.
good.
All right, and with that, no other comments or questions. We're adjourned.
Everyone else has left the call.